Chapter 545. Little brat, wait a minute. Wang Feng said angrily. I also have a figurine here. Well, a wooden carving, give this to the owner of these wooden carvings. After saying that, Wang Feng's palms sucked, and a small tree next to him directly shattered, turning into a bare wooden stick almost instantly. This wooden stick was slightly thick, and Wang Feng used his fingertip as a knife, flickering around this wooden stick like a light shadow. Swish! Swish! In just a moment, countless wood shavings flew from his fingertip, and in the blink of an eye, 2 lifelike figurines were formed. With Wang Feng's current strength and body, even if he had never learned carving, he could quickly master this skill when carving. If it was in his previous life, it would be impossible to master this skill without more than 10 years of practice. For Wang Feng, who now had the dustless glass body, it only took the time to brew a cup of tea. Here, give these 2 to her. Wang Feng thought for a moment and said. These 2 wooden carvings, one of them was a 6-ring soul emperor with a white robe and a black mask. At that time, only Zhu Zhuqing and Ning Rongrong were sensitive enough to guess his identity. Although he did not admit it at that time, the 2 of them only treated it as a little secret. The other one was a woman. It was the appearance of Ning Rongrong and Jinlian after martial soul fusion. She was like a golden goddess, beautiful, noble, and holy. Little brat, if you dare to sell these 2, I will sell you too. Wang Feng glared at the little boy. Wow, what a beautiful sculpture. I think it looks familiar. Don't worry, big brother. Hey, big brother, where are you? The little boy took the 2 wooden carvings and was very surprised. When he came back to his senses, he did not see the figure of the other party. He hurriedly ran into the town, walked into a pavilion in the center of the town, climbed the stairs to the top floor, opened the curtain, and shouted, Sister Rongrong, just now I met a strange person outside. He did not buy the sculpture you made, but gave me 2 and asked me to give them to you. What a strange big brother, in the pavilion. A woman was sitting on a wooden chair facing the oil fields outside the town. At this time, she was still seriously carving the unfinished wooden sculpture in her hand. Her back view was absolutely beautiful. Her beautiful long hair was incomparably smooth and soft, gently draped over half of her shoulders. She wore simple hair accessories on her head and wore a light pink dress. At this moment, if one looked closely, one could see the soft and beautiful outline of the woman's figure from behind. Hearing the little boy's words, the woman put down the carving knife in her hand, gently blew the wood on the wood shavings, revealing a new wooden sculpture. Then, she turned around, revealing her delicate and perfect facial features. Her eyes were smiling, and her noble temperament was captivating. What? Let me take a look? The little boy walked in front of the woman and handed the wooden carving to her. He chuckled and said, There is one that looks very similar to you. Just as he finished speaking, he suddenly realized that the big sister who had just received the 2 wooden carvings seemed to be completely stunned. Then, his body began to tremble. That pair of beautiful eyes that were like limpid autumn waters actually had a little bit of tears. Patter. The woman looked at the 2 wooden carvings in a daze. You are still alive, you must still be alive. The woman looked at the 2 wooden sculptures in a daze, and her tears fell like rain. Wang Feng did not expect that in Soto City, the place where the Shrek Academy was built, the 7-treasure glazed tile sect would build a town. And it was called Feng Town. It was most likely done by Ning Rongrong. As for the purpose, Wang Feng could not explain it clearly. Recalling the wooden sculptures on the little boy's body, Wang Feng felt a little complicated. Past events passed by like smoke. Thinking about this, Wang Feng felt a lot of emotions. He wondered if he should go to the 7-treasure glazed tile sect. After thinking about it, he decided to forget about it. There was no need to go so deliberately. It was not appropriate to meet them now. After staying in Soto City for a few days, Wang Feng did not stop and continued to travel to many places. Some were places Wang Feng had been to before, some were places Wang Feng had never been to before. Wang Feng even heard news about Oscar and Ma Hongjun. Although there was still a year before the date he and Shrek agreed to meet, Wang Feng still felt a little emotional when he heard news about them. Wang Feng's journey was very fast. He would only stay in a city or place for a few days, observing the various events in the city. Some were about him, some were about others, and some were about him. Wang Feng felt a lot of enlightenment. In the past 4 years the continent seemed to have changed a lot. The biggest change was his story of opening the 9th gate. It could be said that it was spread across the entire continent. Ma Hongjun and Oscar teamed up and made a good name for themselves in the world of Soul Masters. They were now around rank 57, and were not inferior to Tang San. After all, the two of them had also consumed immortal herbs. Oscar loved delicious food. In the past 4 years, he used grilled sausages as the foundation and created all kinds of food, which was loved by the world of Soul Masters. His most famous dish was called the Jinhua grilled sausage pot. It was said to be a combination of more than 10 kinds of delicious ingredients, including sea, land, and air. The main ingredient was the Jinhua grilled sausage, and it was cooked with aged wine. The finished product was soft and tender, with a rich meaty aroma. After Wang Feng heard about this dish, he thought, "Isn't this the King Buddha jumps over the wall? It's even the Douluo version of the Buddha jumps over the wall. Oscar is still impressive. I wonder if he has found someone he likes?" Wang Fengxin thought. The Oscar he knew was slightly different from the original novel. Oscar's dream was to travel across the continent and spread delicious food. Ma Hongjuan's reputation was even greater. His Fire Phoenix martial soul was becoming stronger, even though he hadn't found a suitable partner because of the sparrow-tailed phoenix crown. He and Oscar were called the Jinhua Phoenixes. Wang Feng didn't know what to say about this name. After hearing about the two of them, Wang Feng also traveled across half of the Heaven Do Empire. Other than Heaven Do City, he went to all the other duchies. 3 months had passed. After hearing about many old friends, he was already at the border of the Heaven Do Empire and in the territory of the Star Luo Empire. During these 3 months of traveling, Wang Feng was alone. He didn't fight a single battle. He was like a grain of sand in the mortal world, drifting with the waves. He had also seen the different cultures of the various places on the continent, as well as the various forms of life. He also met many people. There were ordinary commoners, shrewd merchants, powerful soul cultivators, and noble nobles. He could vaguely feel that his spirit was different, but he couldn't put his finger on it. During these 3 months, Wang Feng didn't cultivate at all. He just traveled normally. However, that ancient tree gave Wang Feng a strange feeling. He seemed to have been touched. Wang Feng roughly understood something. The word front in this ancient tree seemed to have something to do with his understanding of the world. It didn't have much to do with the strength of his spiritual power. Life is full of all kinds of things. It seems that everything is unpredictable, but there are traces to follow. Just like that, Wang Feng used the tree branch to spin on the map. The tip of the tree branch landed in a corner of the Star Luo Empire, and Wang Feng stepped on the road to the Star Luo Empire. Author's note: I'm writing in my hometown. Although I didn't go out, my condition is normal. End of chapter. Chapter 546. Star Luo Empire. In the original novel, there was very little specific introduction to this country. Wang Feng didn't know much, but the culture of this country was much fiercer than that of the Heaven Do Empire. Perhaps it was because of the empire's policies and the influence of the election model, causing the cities here to be more aggressive and more frequent. After all, even the heir of the empire was elected in a more cruel way. The soul masters of the major academies were naturally more aggressive. The most prominent feature was the Soul Battle Arena. The Soul Battle Arena of the Star Luo Empire saw blood every time, Unlike the Soul Battle Arena of the Heaven Do Empire, which was classified into different categories. If it wasn't a life and death battle, there wouldn't be blood. At most, there would be injuries. This kind of hot-blooded and valiant fighting style surprised Wang Feng. In such high-intensity battles, the combat power of the Soul Masters of the Star Luo Empire was generally stronger than the Soul Masters of the Heaven Do Empire. In the Douluo world, the combat power of a Soul Master largely determined the strength of a country. This was because Soul Masters affected all aspects of a country. On the way, Wang Feng also met another old friend, Zhang Xiaotian, the captain of the Ares College team that he eliminated in the first round of the finals. A team with the potential to win the championship. Wang Feng was traveling with a caravan of the Star Luo Empire and happened to be attacked by a few soul beasts. Then, he met Zhang Xiaotian's team and was saved. He was a powerful genius in the martial spirit hall who had a super strong martial soul, Zhan Meng Beast. Now, he was already rank 61. More than 4 years ago, he was less than rank 47. Now, he had risen 14 ranks, averaging 4 or 5 ranks a year. He was one of the most powerful geniuses in the Star Luo Empire today. He was not inferior to the current crown prince of the Star Luo Empire, Dai Mubai. Wang Feng was just an ordinary guard. He blended into the caravan and looked at Zhang Xiaotian from afar. More than 4 years had passed, and Zhang Xiaotian was in his 20s. After being cured by Wang Feng with the Golden Lotus, his strength had not suffered any damage. Listening to their conversation, Wang Feng also learned that Zhang Xiaotian had graduated from the Ares College. He was still in the Ares College, but he was also traveling the Star Luo Empire. He did not accept any invitation from any power. Otherwise, with his strength and talent, he would be a guest of honor in any family. Zhang Xiaotian should be a genius on par with Shrek's 7 monsters. To a certain extent, he might even surpass them. It didn't appear in the original novel. Wang Feng watched from afar, feeling a little emotional. This guy had now grown into an extremely burly and majestic man. He was at least 9 meters tall, but he didn't give off an exaggerated feeling. The muscles all over his body were very well proportioned. Little brother, why do I feel that you look a little familiar? Have I seen you somewhere before? At this moment, Zhang Xiaotian, who was talking to the leader of the caravan, seemed to have felt Wang Feng's gaze. He could not help but turn to look at Wang Feng in surprise. Wang Feng grinned. He wasn't wearing a mask at this moment, but he had changed his appearance. Otherwise, with his prestige, he would probably cause a huge commotion wherever he went. I'm just an ordinary soul master. How can I compare to you, the new war god of the Star Luo Empire? Wang Feng said casually. Zhang Xiaotian was known as the new war god of the Star Luo Empire. He was the cornerstone of the Star Luo Empire's Soul Master world. This title was given by the Star Luo Empire's crown prince, Dai Mubai. Zhang Xiaotian was indeed worthy of this title. Zhang Xiaotian looked at Wang Feng a little suspiciously. He continued, "That's strange. I don't know why you give me a familiar feeling." Wang Fengxin thought to himself, this guy is indeed quite impressive. He can even sense this. I've only met him a few times. Haha, brother Zhan, you must be joking. He's an ordinary soul master hired by our caravan. How do you know him? The leader of the caravan laughed and said, I still have to thank you for your help just now. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to deal with that 10,000-year soul beast. Right, brother Zhan, why are you in a border city of the Star Luo Empire? I'm traveling. Someone asked me to look for someone. Zhang Xiaotian was very forthright. He didn't seem to have any intention of hiding anything. Looking for someone? Who are you looking for, brother Zhan? The middle-aged leader was astonished. If you're looking for someone, the Treasured Rock Chamber of Commerce can help you. After all, we're traveling through various cities. We're very well informed. You saved us just now, and you don't want anything in return. We can still help you with this. This, you might not be able to help. Jean Xiaotian shook his head. How do you know we can't help if you don't tell us? The middle-aged man laughed. Brother Jean, are you looking down on the Treasured Rock Chamber of Commerce? The Treasured Rock Chamber of Commerce's businesses were located in the Star Luo Empire. It was considered one of the largest chambers of commerce. Wang Feng heard that there were titled Douluo overseeing it. It was also considered a huge power in the Star Luo Empire. All right then, Jean Xiaotian grinned. The person I'm looking for is called Jiu Kai. You've all heard of him, right? Do you have any news of him? Hearing this, the middle-aged man was stunned. Many of the guards who were packing their luggage were also stunned. Why is Jean Xiaotian looking for me? Wang Feng was also stunned as he thought to himself. Brother Jean, you must be joking. The middle-aged man laughed bitterly. The Martial Soul Hall has already announced to the continent that Jiu Kai is dead. How can you find him? Now that the entire continent knew about Jiu Kai, they naturally knew about it too. That's right. Jean Xiaotian laughed. However, I don't think he's dead. Furthermore, I've been entrusted by the Zhu family to find him. The Zhu family? The middle-aged man was bewildered. The Zhu family is now the #1 family in the Star Luo Empire. That person is also known as the #1 beauty in the Star Luo Empire. She's terrifyingly powerful. She just turned 18, and I heard she's already at rank 61? Brother Jean, you have joined the Zhu family? Don't tell me you're attracted to her too? That's not it, Jean Xiaotian shook his head. The Zhu family entrusted me to find him. The Treasured Rock Chamber of Commerce should have also been entrusted by the Zhu family, right? Furthermore, I don't believe that Jiu Kai is dead. That's why I've been traveling the continent for the past 2 years to find him. Hearing this, the middle-aged man understood. The Zhu family had developed rapidly in the past 2 years, and they were originally a noble family of the Star Luo Empire. They had also entrusted the Treasured Rock Chamber of Commerce to search for Jiu Kai. However, the Martial Soul Hall had already confirmed it, and they didn't want to waste their time searching for a dead person. He also didn't understand why the Zhu family wanted to find a dead person. Wang Feng was silent. The middle-aged man leading the group was definitely talking about Zhu Zhuqing. Looking at the situation, Zhu Zhuqing should have improved a lot. End of chapter. Chapter 547. 4 years ago, at the time of the competition, he was only rank 43. Now, he was rank 61, which was an increase of 18 levels. His improvement speed was even more exaggerated than that of many geniuses. In another year, he would be at least rank 65 or 66. Too slow. It seems that Zhu Zhuqing didn't develop the meteoric tear. She shouldn't be able to use it. Wang Feng shook his head inwardly. She only said that the meteoric tear could increase her cultivation speed rapidly. If I had known earlier, I would have told her some of the methods. If not, I could have tried compressing my soul power or go through all kinds of extreme training to activate the meteoric tear's energy. The meteoric tear had many functions, but if she didn't know how to use them, she could only speed up her cultivation speed. However, it's fine as long as she's doing well, Wang Fengxin thought. Recalling the scene in the Pope's palace, Wang Fengxin felt a little complicated. After thinking for a long time, he still didn't plan to meet him. Little brother, how about I spar with you? At this time, Jean Xiaotian looked at Wang Feng again. You give me a different feeling. F***ck, I've hidden it so well, but I still can't hide this eye-catching characteristic of mine? Wang Fengxin was speechless. Then Wang Feng shook his head and said, No, I'm just an ordinary soul master guard. I can't beat you. This Jean Xiaotian is a little interesting. A man with such a strong sixth sense. If I fight with him, he might be able to detect something. Wang Feng didn't come out to show off this time, nor did he plan to fight. His purpose was very clear. Seeing this, Jean Xiaotian didn't insist. After a while, Jean Xiaotian left, and Wang Feng continued his tour of the Star Luo Empire. During this period, Wang Feng walked leisurely. Sometimes he became a guard of a business group, sometimes he became a nameless hunter, sometimes he was an ordinary merchant, and sometimes he pretended to be a noble. Wang Feng used his own understanding of what he had learned and seen in the past 3 months to present what he had learned and seen. Playing the various roles of the mortal world was very interesting. Looking at things from a different perspective, it was really different if one had never experienced it before. Is this the legendary experience of the mortal world? 2 months later, Wang Feng stood in a restaurant, gently swirling a cup of light purple wine as he gazed at the vast city, and sighed softly. 5 months had passed since the start of the journey. During his 2 months in the Star Luo Empire, he had traveled to many places. He was filled with emotions. Wang Feng realized that although everyone had a martial soul, there were only a few who could be of help. Most of the people who had a martial soul had an innate soul power that was too low to be of any use. There was not much difference between having a martial soul and not having a martial soul. What was most interesting was that most of the ordinary people had more respect and trust for the martial spirit palace than the two empires. This was because the Martial Soul Hall had set up many rules and provided many soul masters with free subsidies, just like the modern national subsidies. Moreover, the Martial Spirit Palace had a high prestige among the common people, and most of them had a good reputation. That was the most coquettish thing. For most ordinary people, a country was more like a place of belonging, and it was also very difficult to replace. The existence of the Martial Spirit Palace was even more special. Sometimes, Wang Feng thought that although the Martial Spirit Palace was the villain in the original novel, it had made great contributions in the Douluo world. It could be said that it had set up many rules for cultivating martial souls and opened up a new path. It was just that some of the leaders had changed the original position and purpose of the Martial Spirit Palace and brought it to an extreme, which led to its destruction. Is this the law of development of all things? Wang Feng murmured. In the ancient times of my previous life, there were more than 2,000 years of history, and nothing could be maintained for a long time. Any empire's power would slowly evolve and change in the river of time, and eventually deviate from its starting point. The same goes for the Martial Spirit Palace. Wang Feng seemed to have realized something. Suddenly, Wang Feng felt the ancient tree that he had been carrying on his chest move slightly. He took it out and wrapped it with his spiritual power. This time, he could feel a series of mystical chants appearing on the ancient tree. Streams of will were emitted from the ancient tree and imprinted into his mind, forming an ancient word that represented the passage of time, forward secret word. Wang Feng took a deep breath. It appeared. As expected, this thing needs to be experienced and comprehended. The forward secret word was a little special. It had certain requirements for one's spiritual power and soul, or else it would be hard to cultivate. Perhaps it had nothing to do with strength, but with one's realm. The spiritual realm was a very mysterious thing. However, Wang Feng's experience in both lives was not as much as what he had experienced in the past few months. It's time to leave. There's less than a month left, just enough time to cultivate the forward secret word. Wang Feng thought silently. In these 5 months, Wang Feng had seen many old friends and experienced many different characters in the mortal world. He didn't show off and lived an ordinary life. Although his fighting strength hadn't improved, his temperament had become more and more steady, simple and unpretentious. Wang Feng also learned a lot. He learned various negotiation skills from the merchants, knowledge of the continent, how to protect and take care of others from the guards, and also learned many ancient noble etiquette from the side of an old noble. Wang Feng had even observed a politician from the Star Luo Empire for half a month. At that time, Wang Feng was lucky enough to meet Dai Mubai. Dai Mubai was now the crown prince of the Star Luo Empire, and his elder brother was dying. Furthermore, Dai Mubai took Shui Yu as the crown prince's concubine in a forceful manner, ignoring the advice of many people around him. This made many nobles in the Star Luo Empire unhappy. After all, the Shui family was an ordinary family in the Heaven Dou Empire. However, Shui Yu and Zhu Zhuqing of the Zhu family became sisters with different surnames, and directly blocked the voices of many old nobles in the Star Luo Empire. Although the Star Luo Empire and the Heaven Dou Empire were two different empires, their customs were different. However, these nobles and politicians were very similar. Wang Feng could now say without reservation that if he wanted to hide in this mortal world, no one would be able to find him. His camouflage ability had already reached the max. Wang Feng felt that he should not be inferior to those ace agents from his previous life. This kind of mortal experience could allow impetuous people to truly calm down and think about themselves. Actually, it was necessary for many soul masters. Whether it was soul masters, martial artists, or cultivators, to put it bluntly, they were all cultivators. If one blindly cultivated, one's state of mind would be insufficient, and it would be very easy to encounter a bottleneck. Wang Feng did not encounter any bottlenecks because his dustless glass was too abnormal. However, his state of mind was indeed insufficient. In his previous life, Wang Feng was a small otaku. After idling around in the Douluo world for 6 years, he received the help of the system and soared to the heavens. Relying on his tenacious willpower, he worked hard to cultivate, and all kinds of negative emotions had no effect on Wang Feng. He was completely unhindered. However, in reality, he had very little understanding of this world. Due to his insufficient state of mind, it was difficult for him to manifest the word anterior. Even if there were no problems now, there would be problems in the future. In this close to half a year of traveling around the continent, Wang Fengxin's state of mind had been perfected. End of chapter. Chapter 548. Wang Feng finally understood why those immortal cultivators who had cultivated to a certain level would often be sent out to gain experience in the world of mortals. Although it was a very old-fashioned method, it was still useful. Thinking of this, Wang Feng finished the strong liquor in his cup in one gulp and then walked out of the hotel, planning to leave. However, when he walked out of the hotel, he heard a clear voice. "Young mistress, you should go back to cultivate later. Your friend from the Heaven Dou Empire has sent you a letter." Yes. Although Wang Feng was not familiar with the voice in front of him, the cold voice at the back made Wang Feng turn around to take a look. It was a girl with a perfect figure. She was dressed in black, and her face was as white as snow. She looked like she was only 14 or 15 years old, but she was exceptionally beautiful. Her long black hair was tied up. Although only her side profile could be seen, both her appearance and her figure were alluring. As long as one's eyes were on her, it would be difficult to move them away. The slightly childish face, the mature and perfect figure, and the cold and elegant temperament were somewhat contradictory, but they were perfectly integrated into the girl's body. I didn't expect to meet her. Wang Feng was stunned and looked at her from afar. The girl and her servant were in the middle of the hotel. They seemed to be choosing a room and did not see him. It has been more than 4 years. She has matured a lot. Her figure is better too. She has also grown taller. Her soul power is 2 ranks higher than what the leader of the Chamber of Commerce said. Wang Feng looked at the girl's side profile, but he did not go over to greet her. "I will see you then." Wang Feng looked at her deeply and quickly walked out of the hotel. He felt waves in his heart. Just as Wang Feng stepped out of the hotel, the girl seemed to have sensed something. She turned around abruptly and looked at the entrance. There were only pedestrians coming and going at the entrance, but she could not find the figure that she had missed for many years. She could only vaguely see a graceful back figure flashing through the crowd. She rushed to the door and looked around. The strange feeling in her heart did not disappear for a long time. She could feel her heart pounding. "Young mistress, what's wrong?" The servant followed her. Nothing. Zhu Zhuqing touched her heart and felt it beat abnormally. She shook her head. Why do I have a feeling that he has appeared? Zhu Zhuqing's heart throbbed. It's been more than 4 years, Wang Feng, where are you? Looks like there is some attraction and connection between the two meteoric tears. Wang Feng also touched his heart and thought to himself, but Zhu Zhuqing's meteoric tear hasn't been used before, so she can't feel it very strongly. Otherwise, she would have sensed me the moment I appeared beside her. When he saw Zhu Zhuqing, he noticed that she had become more mature, but she had also lost a lot of weight. As a result, her figure had become even better. However, the training had come to an end for Wang Feng. He was less than a month away from the date he had agreed to meet the two-titled Doulu. To be precise, it was only slightly more than 10 days. In the next 10 days, I will do my best to cultivate the anterior secret character and raise my mind and soul to a new level. Wang Feng found a remote forest that was about 1 day's journey away from the martial spirit palace. Then, he started to cultivate the anterior secret character quietly. After the forward secret word appeared, the contents weren't too profound for Wang Feng. In addition to Wang Feng's pure soul, it was very easy for him to cultivate it. The effect of the dustless glass body was now displayed. The body that was completely tempered by the karmic fire of the Red Lotus was unprecedentedly strong. This treasure was also slowly being developed. The more it was developed, the more Wang Feng could feel the brilliance of this body. Wang Feng only took a few days to master a profound secret technique like the anterior secret character. At this moment, in Wang Feng's sea of consciousness, there was a vast expanse of white fog. Then, the white fog slowly condensed and shrunk. 3 martial souls revolved around his sea of consciousness. This illusory white fog was his spiritual power. It seemed very large, but it was actually very illusory. However, spiritual power was originally illusory. It was already very difficult for it to form white fog. To a certain extent, this was already the manifestation of spiritual power. Under the cultivation of the anterior secret character, the white fog grew more and more. Wang Feng's spiritual power was actually very scattered. Some of it was contained in his skull, some of it was strengthened after being refined by the Red Lotus karmic fire, and some of it was slowly strengthened after being refined. However, under the cultivation of the anterior secret character, the white fog slowly formed in Wang Feng's sea of consciousness. My spiritual power has condensed into a fog. Wang Feng, on the other hand, was aware of this change. This meant that his mental energy had entered a new realm. Although it was just white fog, it was also a symbol. However, Wang Feng felt that his spiritual power had become indescribably strong. The cultivation of the anterior secret character seems very special. If I continue to cultivate like this, I wonder what will happen. Wang Feng thought to himself. His current spiritual power. No, to be precise, it was already somewhat similar to the divine sense of cultivation. Moreover, it was the divine sense that had condensed into white fog, not the illusory and formless spiritual power. Wang Feng naturally knew what this meant. And the soul, this illusory existence, I seemed to be able to sense it a little. Wang Feng pondered. The soul was also illusory in his previous life, and it was also very illusory in the Douluo world. It was more like a concept. No one knew what it was exactly. However, Wang Feng could vaguely sense his own soul. To be precise, Wang Feng had sensed it when he was being refined by the Red Lotus karmic fire. However, after the refinement, Wang Feng could no longer sense it. But now, with the strength of his spiritual power, Wang Feng could actually sense his soul slightly more clearly. When my spiritual power reaches a certain level, I will be able to resonate with my soul. At that time, I might be able to cultivate my soul into the primordial spirit of those cultivators? Can the primordial spirit leave the body? Even if the physical body is destroyed, as long as the primordial spirit is not destroyed, it will never dissipate. Wang Feng thought. Of course, these were only Wang Feng's guesses. However, since spiritual power could condense into fog, it could condense into water droplets, and water droplets could converge into thin streams, and thin streams could eventually converge into rivers and seas. Finally, it would turn from liquid to solid, and finally solidify into a true primordial spirit. Although he did not have a clear level, Wang Feng seemed to be able to deduce this in advance. Wang Feng's soul was pure, and his spiritual power was also incomparably pure. His cultivation was extremely fast. That enormous spiritual power, under the cultivation of the anterior secret character, transformed into countless white fog every second. A few days later, in the extremely dense white fog, a rice-sized water droplet was formed resplendently. After this water droplet was formed, Wang Feng only felt a loud boom in his mind, as if the world had changed into a form. Countless white fog rapidly gathered towards the water droplet. End of chapter. Chapter 549. Wang Feng suddenly opened his eyes, and lightning flashed in his eyes. He scanned with his divine telekinesis. Within a radius of 1,000 meters, he could see all the changes in all the living beings. It was like a satellite scan. It was terrifying. It wasn't as simple as seeing something or a creature within 1,000 meters. He knew everything within the range like the back of his hand. He didn't even need to open his eyes. Then, he would be able to sense it clearly. After condensing his spiritual power into a water droplet, this kind of perception was beyond Wang Feng's imagination. If Wang Feng were to challenge the path of hell now, he would be able to learn everything about it just by relying on his senses. Wang Feng could even predict what kind of attacks would appear. He could even push through with his second gear ability. Too strong. Wang Feng's divine telekinesis changed, and countless black lights formed a pitch-black longsword in midair. Then whoosh! The longsword suddenly shot out. In the blink of an eye, it broke through 100 meters. It completely exceeded Wang Feng's control of the mysterious dark spike. And the current mysterious dark spike was abnormally strong. Using spiritual power to control objects to kill people was related to spiritual power. The power of the mysterious dark spike was completely proportional to spiritual power. The stronger one's spiritual power, the more powerful the mysterious dark spike would be. With Wang Feng's current spiritual power and the fact that the mysterious dark spike was his own soul bone, it was equivalent to his natal magic treasure. And it wasn't an ordinary flying sword magic treasure. It was naturally more powerful when used. The mysterious dark spike became even stronger. Previously, Wang Feng only used a sharp blade that was tens of centimeters long to test it. But now, it was no longer limited to this kind of sharp blade. The mysterious dark spike in any form was extremely powerful under Wang Feng's control. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Within a range of 200 meters. In almost a few seconds, countless towering trees were easily cut down and fell in front of Wang Feng. Strong. Wang Feng's pupils shrank. If possible, the power of the mysterious dark spike had already surpassed the pure gear ability and could be considered a brand new gear ability. Those below rank 80 won't be able to block my mysterious dark flying sword even if they use soul skills. Wang Feng felt the power of the mysterious dark spike. No, it shouldn't be called the mysterious underworld stab anymore. It would be better to call it the mysterious underworld flying sword. In the capital of slaughter, soul masters can't use soul skills. The mysterious underworld spike can kill any soul master below rank 60. Even if he uses a soul skill to defend himself, he won't be able to block the power of the mysterious underworld spike. Who would have thought that his mental strength would be so terrifying after reaching this level? It can even harm a titled Douluo. The mysterious underworld spike was an external soul bone. Although it was constantly improving, it wasn't as strong as Wang Feng's other abilities. It could only harm middle-ranked soul masters. But now, after his spiritual power had solidified into liquid, its power had reached an unimaginable level. Wang Feng was even confident that he could form a terrifying killing array with just the flying sword formed from the mysterious underworld spike and fully unleash his mental strength. However, this kind of killing formation consumed a lot of mental power. It was fine if they were caught off guard, but if they fought for a long time, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. However, Wang Feng was satisfied. After all, his current mental power could only condense one water droplet. The mental power that had been stored for so long would slowly transform into more water droplets as he cultivated, and his mental power would become stronger. Sooner or later, I'll be able to take your heads from 1,000 miles away. Wang Feng laughed. I, Wang Feng, will also be a sword immortal in the future. Sword come! Wang Feng shouted out loudly, and the Netherrealism flying sword was like a fleeting shadow that descended before Wang Feng. Grow! Wang Feng said plainly. Instantly, the black light condensed on the flying sword twice, causing it to grow larger. In the past, the larger the object formed by the mysterious underworld spike was, the harder it would be for Wang Feng to control it with his mental power. However, this problem was solved now. Unless he formed a huge sword with tens of thousands of mysterious underworld spikes, Wang Feng might find it difficult to control it. However, this problem didn't exist with a sword that was slightly thicker. Wang Feng jumped lightly and landed steadily on the flying sword. Stable. The flying sword didn't even tremble. It was even more stable than the high-speed rail in his previous life. This was the effect of increasing his mental power. Compared to when he stepped on a sharp blade, he had to shake a little. It was many times stronger. Rise. Filled with excitement, Wang Feng shouted softly. In an instant, the flying sword rose dozens of meters in the air before it gradually stopped. Looking at the scene below that was gradually becoming smaller, Wang Feng suddenly felt that this half a year of training was too worth it. Excitement. In his previous life, Wang Feng had this kind of heroic sword dream. He didn't expect that it would finally come true. Actually, Wang Feng didn't care if the mysterious underworld spike was strong or not. What he cared about the most was sword kinesis flight. Keywords: dream realization, pretentious, cool. There were too many reasons for Wang Feng to care about it. This made Wang Feng feel even better than pure flying. Wang Feng placed his hands behind his back and looked down indifferently. The excitement in his eyes completely betrayed him. The increase in his mental power didn't affect Wang Feng's various soul skills and martial souls much because they were directly related to his soul power. However, it had an earth-shattering change in a real battle. This feeling was similar to the emptiness realm. However, the emptiness realm consumed the physical strength of the body. It was equivalent to burning one's potential to erupt with terrifying perception and allow one to perform all kinds of dodging. It was equivalent to the entire body being similar to muscle memory. One could use this to dodge the enemy's attacks and explode with extreme speed. However, spiritual power was different. When one's spiritual power was strong enough, one could sense the enemy's attacks and dodge them in advance. Furthermore, the front secret character had this kind of ability. Of course, Wang Feng had just cultivated it, so the effect wasn't obvious. When he was slightly more advanced, he could even predict the enemy's attacks. Foresight. He could probably even dodge a lot of lock-on soul skills. It's time to go to the martial spirit hall. The speed of the flying sword wasn't slow. The wind in the air was also very noisy. Wang Feng said indifferently. After that, he used his divine thought and the flying sword turned into a ray of light, bringing him in the direction of the Martial Spirit Hall. Today was the last day of half a year. Martial Spirit City, Pontiff's Palace. In the huge square, there were many titled Douluo standing in great numbers. Every titled Douluo was dressed in formal attire. Their golden robes were studded with gems, and their expressions were solemn. Ghost Douluo and Chrysanthemum Douluo were among them. In the center, Bibidon stood quietly. 4 years passed in a flash. As the Pope, she didn't seem to have changed at all. Time didn't leave any traces on her face, but her aura became more dignified and holy. Half a year ago, when the Chrysanthemum Douluo and Ghost Douluo returned, they reported everything that had happened to Bibidon. At that time, Bibidon was very surprised. She didn't expect the white-clothed death god to be so strong. He could actually defeat the Ghost Douluo? He could even cultivate by absorbing all kinds of emotions? End of chapter. Chapter 550. His martial soul was also very mysterious. He even had a 100,000-year soul ring. Bibidon had to pay attention to him. After that, Gui Douluo and Ju Douluo continued to talk about the white-clothed death god. Hulaina also agreed. Bibidon also agreed to the half-year agreement. As long as the white-clothed death god joined the pontiff's palace, Bibidon would let bygones be bygones. She could even represent the martial soul hall to apologize to him. The prerequisite was that the white-clothed death god had to be really powerful and sincerely join the martial soul hall. At the same time, the martial soul hall also secretly investigated the white-clothed death god on the continent. However, they also found out that the white-clothed death god came from the extreme north. There was very little information about him. This meant that the white-clothed death god might have been cultivating in the extreme north. No wonder the white-clothed death god was so powerful if he could cultivate in such a place. Even the martial soul hall didn't dare to enter the extreme north. I say, Elder Ju, Elder Gui, Your Majesty, aren't we paying too much attention to him? At this moment, one of the titled Douluo frowned and said, The white-clothed death god. According to what Elder Gui said, he relied on that special soul skill to suppress Elder Gui. Otherwise, Elder Gui wouldn't have been defeated by him. Although the white-clothed death god can absorb emotions to cultivate, which is indeed special, there is no need for all of us to be here, right? There were a total of 7 titled Doulu. One of them was the second consecrator of the martial soul hall. The rest were titled Douluo from the Elder Hall. Other than the exceptional Douluo, all the titled Douluo from the Pope's palace were here. There were still 2 titled Douluo who should be recuperating. Ju Douluo and Gui Douluo didn't say anything. It was obvious that if the white-clothed death god came and didn't choose to join the martial soul hall, he wouldn't be able to leave. This was the agreement back then. It seemed like they were paying attention to him, but they were actually deterring him. If the white-clothed death god didn't come, the martial soul hall would have sufficient reason to issue a kill order. What do you know? Elder Gui said that according to the agreement, if the white-clothed death god comes and doesn't join the martial soul hall, he has violated the agreement. We have reason to keep him here. Another titled Douluo said. He's not that stupid. Since he's here, he must want to join the martial spirit palace. The thorny pufferfish Douluo shook his head and said, however, Elder Gui said that he has the abilities of a titled Doulu. I think this is still debatable. The titled Douluo expressed their opinions. Over the past 4 years, the martial spirit hall had accepted 2 titled Douluo on the surface. They were both powerful individuals who had been cultivating in seclusion. However, he wasn't a transcendent Doulu. But they didn't use this kind of formation. It could be seen that His Majesty the Pope valued this white-clothed god of death. Perhaps this had something to do with the fact that he had saved her disciple. Enough. At this moment, the scepter in Bibi Dong's hand vibrated on the ground. His calm voice immediately silenced the few titled Doulu. Hulaina, who was standing behind the Bibi Dong, looked on nervously. He's here. Bibidon's eyes narrowed. It seemed to have sensed something. The rest of the titled Douluo were stunned. They looked at the steps below the plaza, but they didn't see anyone. In the sky, a golden-haired titled Douluo shouted. Swish, swish, swish. Instantly, everyone's gazes focused on the sky. A white figure flew over from afar like a stream of light. There were no soul power undulations. No wonder the titled Douluo didn't sense anything. However, as titled Douluo, they were all very powerful. Naturally, they could see what that white streak of light was. It was a mysterious person wearing a white robe and a mask. Not a single part of his body was exposed. Beneath his feet was a long sword formed from sharp blades. He was standing on this long sword with his hands behind his back. He was flying over on his sword. His elegance was unparalleled. All the titled Douluo were stunned as they watched. Flying on a sword wasn't difficult for a titled Douluo. Titled Douluo had the ability to fly. If he had a tool soul, he could easily fly on his sword when he revealed his martial soul true body. For example, their honorary elder, the sword Douluo, could easily fly on his sword. However, he would release soul power undulations when he used his martial soul to fly on his sword. But now, they couldn't sense any soul power undulations from him. How did he do it? This was a little beyond their imagination. They could only guess that it was some other method. However, they had to admit that this white-clothed Grim Reaper's aura was very strong. Swoosh, swoosh. From the moment they discovered it, it had only been a few dozen seconds. In the square, a pitch-black light flashed, and that figure had already landed safely on the ground. Silence. Very silence. Both parties seemed to be sizing each other up. Wang Feng was sizing up Bibidon and the 7 titled Douluo, and this martial soul hall, which he hadn't seen in a long time. He was very emotional. He didn't expect him to come with such an identity. Bibidon, it's been a few years since we last met. It seems like you've been doing well. Wang Fengxin couldn't help but laugh. Logically speaking, as someone who had a godlike view, he could understand many things that Bibidon did. However, understanding was one thing. If there was enmity, there was enmity. Wang Feng still remembered clearly that he had escaped from the Pope's palace. At this moment, Hulaina, who was behind Bibidon, seemed a little agitated. However, she didn't rush out because there were too many titled Douluo present. Are you the white-clothed Grim Reaper? Bibidon's dignified voice sounded. Her voice carried an irresistible aura, and it was easy for people to overlook her gender. Are you the Pope of the Martial Soul Hall? It seems like the Martial Soul Hall thinks highly of me? Wang Feng swept his gaze across the 7 titled Douluo. There are actually 7 titled Douluo here to welcome me? However, I, Nicholas Wang Wu, am worthy of it. After he finished speaking, the entire place fell silent again. Even Bibidon was a little stunned. This white-clothed Grim Reaper seems a little arrogant. Just as the ghost Douluo had said, she had sent the 7 titled Douluo here to intimidate him, not to welcome him. Did this white-clothed Grim Reaper take it personally? Arrogant. The thorny pufferfish Douluo couldn't help but say, "Kid, you're being so mysterious. Who are you? If you want to join the Martial Soul Hall, we will naturally welcome you. However, if you want us to welcome you, we'll see if you have the ability to do so." Wang Feng glanced at the thorny pufferfish Douluo. A titled Douluo with a thorny pufferfish martial soul, who isn't even rank 94, wants to see my abilities? Alright. I'm indeed here to join the Martial Soul Hall. I also want to see if there's anything worthy of me joining the Martial Soul Hall. After he finished speaking, Wang Feng walked to one side of the plaza. I don't like to talk too much. Let's fight. If I can't defeat you in 3 moves, I'll get out of here. After he finished speaking, Wang Feng pointed to the steps below the Pope's palace. His tone was very calm, and he didn't sound arrogant at all. He didn't seem to be emotional at all. It was as if he was supposed to say that. However, after hearing his words, the few titled Douluo's expressions changed. A thought surfaced in their minds. This white-clothed Grim Reaper is a tough nut to crack. However, Bibidon's eyes sparkled as she stared at Wang Feng. She was a little surprised. This white-clothed Grim Reaper is really interesting. Hulina clasped her hands tightly behind her. As she looked at the white-clothed Grim Reaper, she seemed to be looking at the sun. She was in a daze. P.S. There are 2 or 3 more chapters tonight. Please count your votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 551. After half a year of training, Wang Feng's soul power had increased by 1 rank, reaching rank 59, even though he hadn't cultivated. The biggest improvement that Wang Feng's spiritual power had given him was the mysterious underworld spike. The mysterious underworld spike's strength had increased to a level where it was comparable to Wang Feng's other abilities. At the same time, the skull's Shadowmist soul skill and perception soul skill had also been greatly strengthened. Now that he had activated Shadowmist, even Bibidon wouldn't be able to sense his soul power rank and martial soul. In addition, his strong spiritual power also gave him unparalleled perception in battle, which was very helpful in battle. Other than that, it didn't bring much change to Wang Feng's other martial soul abilities. Although the cultivation of his spiritual power had improved by leaps and bounds, there weren't many effective ways to deal with enemies. For example, Wang Feng didn't know many spiritual attack methods. He could only think of using a tool to kill people. The use of spiritual power had yet to be developed. Therefore, although Wang Feng's spiritual power was very strong now, and there was probably no soul master in the Douluo world who could materialize spiritual power and condense it into spiritual water droplets like him, the actual help that it gave Wang Feng in battle wasn't ridiculously high. At the same time, in the Pope's palace, Wang Feng couldn't expose all the abilities that he had used the last time he came to the Pope's palace. The chaotic green lotus had 4 forms. The dark angel couldn't be possessed, and the mysterious underworld spike couldn't be changed too much. Once it changed too much, it would be easy to arouse suspicion. Until now, in the eyes of Hulina and Tang San, Wang Feng's mysterious underworld spike was a sharp blade that was dozens of centimeters long. They would only think that it was a soul bone or a special martial soul. Furthermore, using a tool to kill people was too mysterious. It was completely different from Wang Feng's mysterious underworld spike. As for soul rings, it didn't matter. He just had to find an excuse to hide them. Hiding soul rings might be rare for normal soul masters on the continent, but these titled Douluo weren't very surprised. There was nothing to say about his soul power rank. When Wang Feng said that he relied on his emotions to increase his strength, he could explain it to them directly. It couldn't be calculated according to the normal cultivation rank. Right now, there weren't many abilities that Wang Feng could use. But every one of them was very powerful. The power of the blood mark, the original sin domain, the mysterious underworld spike, the cauldron of heaven and earth, the 100,000-year torso bone, and his own strength. For example, Wang Feng did not intend to use Void Realm in order to avoid being exposed. On the square, Wang Feng looked at the thorny pufferfish Douluo with an indifferent expression. He had said those words on purpose. His goal was simple: to create a persona for himself. Being pretentious was the process, but setting up a character was the goal. That kind of aloof and arrogant, peerless expert persona. The thorny pufferfish Douluo was also sizing up his opponent. Logically speaking, even though they had spoken with disdain earlier, they still regarded Hou Yuhao with great importance. Hou Yuhao was able to defeat the ghost Douluo, and even though he had used a soul skill to his advantage, he was definitely strong. It was just that as titled Douluo, they had never seen or exchanged blows with Hou Yuhao before, so none of them were willing to admit defeat. Otherwise, how could a titled Douluo, who had cultivated for decades, submit to and admire someone so casually? However, when he heard the other party say that if he couldn't defeat him in 3 moves, he would get lost. Furthermore, it was said in such a calm tone. Even he found it unbearable. Ha! The thorny pufferfish Douluo roared, and his 9 soul rings lit up. Yellow, yellow, purple, 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 black, 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 black. It was practically the best soul ring configuration. A light black water dolphin covered in thorns suddenly appeared from his body. Reveal your martial spirit. The thorny pufferfish Douluo's soul rings lit up, and his aura was immense. He was a rank 92 titled Douluo, but his abilities weren't inferior to those of a rank 93 titled Dalu. Even among ordinary titled Douluo, he was considered a very powerful assault type titled Dalu. No need, Wang Feng said calmly. Tang Wulin's words made the thorny pufferfish Douluo's head bleed. This white god of death was too arrogant. Martial soul true body. The thorny pufferfish Douluo couldn't take it anymore. He roared furiously, and his seventh soul ring flashed as he activated his martial soul true body. He saw a black capybara the size of a shark floating in the air. Its two fins, which looked like the wings of an airplane, were gently swaying. It was covered with sharp thorns, and its whole body was embroidered with strange patterns, which looked like sashimi. He could only see the thorny pufferfish Douluo's body through his head. Following this, the remaining soul rings on the thorny pufferfish Douluo's body lit up. However, at this moment, the white god of death moved. More accurately speaking, he didn't move. Instead, it was the sharp blades surrounding his body that moved. The sharp blades were 1/2 meter long and 3 fingers wide, and they looked like short thorns. Swoosh! They pierced through the air and pierced through the air. Their terrifying speed tore through the clouds. They fell from the sky like raindrops, falling down. Every blade seemed to be very powerful. The ear-piercing sounds caused the other Douluo's expressions to change. Everyone present was a titled Douluo. Naturally, they could feel how powerful these sharp blades were. Is this his ability to kill people with his imperial equipment? Those sharp blades don't seem to belong to his martial soul. They should be special soul bones. However, they don't have any soul power. His spiritual power is very strong. The golden-haired elder furrowed his brow and said, "Does your holiness see anything wrong?" Bibidon didn't answer. This white god of death had a fog-like aura that could conceal him from others. Evidently, it was a special ability. This wasn't a big deal. Everyone knew how to hide their auras. Bibidon had been to the city of Massacre before. However, he didn't stay for long. He only secretly watched Hulaina and saw the white god of death's abilities. However, he didn't think much of it. This was because the white god of death's imperial equipment didn't seem very powerful. This was especially so in the city of Massacre. Soul masters couldn't use soul skills. It was naturally difficult for them to defend against such sharp weapons with their physical bodies. Otherwise, even a rank 60 soul master would be able to use his soul skills to defend himself. Not to mention a titled Dalu. Logically speaking, such an attack was like tickling a titled Douluo. The thorny pufferfish Douluo thought the same. He saw the sharp blades coming towards him. They seemed very powerful. He was disdainful, but he didn't let his guard down. His skin suddenly became glossy, as if he had smeared oil on it. Following this, a pitch-black soul ring lit up. 3 special defensive barriers rose from his body to resist the attack of the mysterious sharp blades. However, when the sharp blades landed, everyone's expressions changed. "Pup! Combine!" Wang Feng said softly. Dozens of sharp blades suddenly combined into a long sword in midair. It was the same sword that he had used to fly over. After combining, the speed of the flying sword increased tremendously. It almost turned into a streak of silver, flowing light. Under the control of his spiritual power, the Xianming flying sword finally revealed its terrifying strength in front of a titled Dalu. The 3 barriers that the thorny pufferfish Douluo had erected were instantly pierced through. Chapter 552. A crisp popping sound could be heard. It was as easy as popping a balloon. The speed of the flying sword was so quick that it was hard to capture it. Even the thorny pufferfish Douluo's spiritual power couldn't detect its speed. One could only imagine how powerful it was. This was the effect of the difference in spiritual power. In fact, if this wasn't the mysterious underworld spike and was only an ordinary sword, it wouldn't have this kind of power. However, the key was that the mysterious underworld spike was Wang Feng's soul bone. He had been using it for a long time and it was almost telepathic. It was easy for him to control it. Without any hindrance to his spiritual power, its strength was greatly increased. This was especially so after he condensed his spiritual water droplets. Swish, swish, swish. In the blink of an eye, the thorny pufferfish Douluo didn't even have time to unleash his other soul skills. After the mysterious underworld flying sword pierced through his defensive barrier, his martial soul true body was pierced by the flying sword, and a few new wounds were added. Right now, the mysterious underworld spike had evolved into a true mysterious underworld flying sword. With Wang Feng's current spiritual power, it could cause damage to a titled Douluo. Unless the thorny pufferfish Douluo was a defense-type titled Douluo with extremely strong defensive abilities. However, it was a pity that he wasn't. If he were a transcendent Douluo like the Ghost Shadow Douluo, who was immune to a lot of damage, the mysterious underworld flying sword wouldn't be very effective. However, the thorny pufferfish Douluo wasn't a transcendent Douluo either. He was only a rank 92 assault-type Douluo. The sound of the flying sword resonated in mid-air. Finally, the flying sword landed in front of the thorny pufferfish Douluo's huge martial soul true body. The tip of the sword shone with cold light. Gulp. The thorny pufferfish Douluo took a deep breath. This white-clothed Grim Reaper is quite strong. At this moment, the titled Douluo beside him were also stunned. He was suppressed. The thorny pufferfish Douluo was completely suppressed. These sharp blades are much stronger than they were in the city of Massacre. Bibidan's heart skipped a beat. Furthermore, they're not just ordinarily strong. They're at least a few levels stronger. What could have caused such a powerful change in his blades? The soul force on the blade is very weak. He should be using pure spiritual power to control it. This means that this person's spiritual power has already reached an unimaginable level? Bibidan immediately. Hulaina, who was behind him, also felt it. To be precise, she felt it very clearly. The power of these sharp blades had become countless times stronger. It was as if he had stepped into a whole new realm and domain. I've lost. The thorny pufferfish Douluo spoke decisively as he looked at the sharp light that was only a few centimeters away from him. In fact, when the sharp blades combined to form a flying sword and pierced through his defense, he felt that he might lose. Then, it gently cut open his martial soul true body. One had to know that his martial soul was covered with a special layer of grease. Ordinary weapons couldn't pierce through it, unless it was a tool martial soul of the same grade. However, the other party's flying sword was able to cut through it. It could be seen that the other party's sharp sword was not only extremely powerful, but also extremely sharp. Is there anyone else who wants to spar with me? With a thought from Wang Feng, the flying swords instantly returned to his side, turning into dozens of sharp blades that floated in the air. The thorny pufferfish Douluo walked back dejectedly. I told you that the white-robed Grim Reaper isn't simple. The ghost Douluo laughed sinisterly. Although he was able to defeat me because of that special soul skill, it's not that simple. Your soul power rank is lower than mine. If we really fight, you might die even faster. His martial soul is a small cauldron, and he hasn't even used it yet. The thorny pufferfish Douluo's face turned black, but he couldn't say anything. In fact, even if Wang Feng used his martial soul, the effects wouldn't be any better. This was because the mysterious underworld spike was already very strong. Not only was it lethal to low-level soul masters, but it was also lethal to high-level soul masters. It was just like how one's feet were stronger than one's hands. If one's hands could kill an ant, one's feet could also kill it. There was no difference. Let me spar with you. At this moment, a titled Douluo stepped forward. It was the thorny pufferfish Douluo's good friend, the snake spear Dalu. His martial soul was a snake spear, a tool martial soul. It was an extremely sharp martial soul. Seeing his good friend lose so badly, he naturally couldn't sit back and do nothing. Furthermore, his martial soul was a tool martial soul. He wouldn't be defeated so easily. In addition, he had already seen his opponent's moves. He already had an idea of his imperial flying sword. It wasn't that easy to defeat him. That was the truth. Wang Feng could use his mysterious underworld flying sword to defeat the thorny pufferfish Douluo in 3 moves because his opponent didn't know the strength of his flying sword. In addition, his opponent wasn't good at defense. He couldn't react in time and naturally lost. However, things were different now. The snake spear Douluo was a bearded man. He looked a little rough. He didn't like to talk much. He immediately unleashed his martial soul true body. A snake spear that was 8 feet long was gilded in gold. It became more than 10 meters long, and was extremely huge. Once a tool soul master possessed a martial soul true body, his fighting strength wouldn't be inferior to a beast soul master. In fact, he might even be stronger. He was a classic martial soul that came from behind. The snake spear Douluo's snake spear wasn't simple either. Wang Feng focused on him. In a battle between high-level soul masters, it was impossible to rely on techniques to win. He could only defeat his opponent with his true abilities. This was especially so for a titled Douluo. It wasn't like when Wang Feng was still around rank 40. He could use all sorts of tricks to defeat his opponent. However, it was impossible now. He could only rely on his abilities to defeat his opponent. Of course, he still needed to use his brain. Just like now. Once the snake spear Douluo unleashed his martial soul true body, the mysterious underworld flying sword's effect was greatly reduced. Although it was strong enough, the mysterious underworld flying sword wasn't enough to break through the snake spear. Furthermore, the snake spear was huge. It could easily block Wang Feng's mysterious underworld flying sword. This was the effect of sufficient preparation. The snake spear Douluo was only rank 93. However, it was unrealistic for him to defeat the snake spear Douluo like before. However, the more they fought, the more fearful everyone became. It was very simple. The snake spear Douluo could only defend. The white-clothed death god's control of his flying sword was too exquisite. There was no angle that he couldn't attack. At times, he could split his sword into sharp blades. At other times, he could gather his flying sword to attack his opponent. Although the snake spear Douluo could defend and revolve his snake spear around his body, it was very difficult for him to attack the white-clothed death god. The snake spear Douluo was also breaking out in cold sweat. He didn't know how the white-clothed death god was able to control those things so exquisitely. He was able to attack from all angles in the air without any delay. From afar, a pitch-black broadsword could be seen. The broadsword was constantly changing as it attacked the huge snake spear from all angles. Clanging sounds resonated throughout the entire arena. It was so fast that only a streak of flowing light could be seen. Every time it clashed with the snake spear, there would be countless sparks. It was very shocking. However, this was within Wang Feng's expectations. Wang Feng didn't hesitate. His torso bone lit up, and a streak of icy light flashed towards the snake spear Douluo. Chapter 553. Soul Skill, Spirit Seal. However, the snake spear Douluo had expected this. This was because the ghost Douluo had told Bibidon about the abilities of the white-clothed death god when he returned. The few titled Douluo naturally knew about it. However, knowing and witnessing it were two different things. Now that he saw it with his own eyes, the snake spear Douluo focused his gaze. He didn't dare to be careless. His 8th soul ring lit up, soul skill, roasted golden divine spear. As soon as he finished speaking, the gold-plated snake spear became a size larger. It was even bigger than the rod that Wang Feng had given Ming back then. Following this, the snake spear flowed with countless fiery patterns, as if it was about to burn. Clang! The snake spear suddenly stood in front of the snake spear Douluo and instantly covered his body. It was as if it had formed a wall that connected the heavens. The icy light was extremely quick. As it shot over, it struck the snake spear. Almost instantly, the flames on the snake spear froze. In the blink of an eye, the snake spear that was more than 10 meters long was frozen. Break! Seeing this, the snake spear Douluo revealed a confident smile. This roasted golden divine spear wasn't a simple soul skill. It was a type of soul skill that could break through control. Whether it was binding, freezing, restraining, paralyzing, etc., it could break through all of them. At the same time, it could strengthen the snake spear. It could be used to resist the enemy's powerful attack. It was a very strong semi-defensive soul skill. However, the snake spear didn't react to the snake spear Douluo's words. Suddenly, the snake spear Douluo's expression changed. The other titled Douluo's expressions also changed. What's going on? The Thorndolphin Douluo furrowed his brow. As a good friend of the snake spear Douluo, he was naturally aware of the snake spear Douluo's soul skills. At this moment, the ghost Douluo spoke with a hoarse voice. I've already warned you that his ice seal isn't just a simple ice seal. It's also not a simple control-type soul skill. His ice seal can freeze one's consciousness and spirit. If one's tool soul is frozen, there's a high chance that it will weaken the soul master's control over his or her martial soul. After hearing this, many titled Douluo's expressions changed again. That was the truth. The snake spear Douluo could feel that his connection with his snake spear had become much weaker. In particular, the flow of soul power within his tool soul had become much weaker. Although it hadn't completely disappeared, it made it difficult for him to command it. The connection between the two was weakened. The soul skill of 100,000-year soul bone was a 100,000-year soul ring that Wang Feng had fused with the cauldron of heaven and earth. The snake spear Douluo's scorching golden divine spear could nullify most control-type soul skills, but it couldn't nullify the spirit seal soul skill. This was because his connection with his martial soul had been weakened by the ice seal. At this moment, Wang Feng did not make a move. The snake spear Douluo's expression was terrible. After less than 10 seconds, the ice on the snake spear slowly melted, and it was completely freed. With his powers, the snake spear's martial soul true body could only be sealed in ice for around 10 seconds, but that was enough. I've lost. The snake spear Douluo withdrew his martial soul and spoke in a deep voice. 10 seconds. Although he didn't have his martial soul, his opponent's flying sword wasn't sealed in ice. It wasn't difficult for him to defeat a titled Douluo who couldn't use his martial soul. The white-clothed death god's ice seal soul skill was too effective against those who had tool souls. Once they were struck, they wouldn't be able to fight effectively in a short period of time. After all, most soul masters' martial souls were their strongest means of attack. This was the same for titled Dalu. Who else? Wang Feng swept his gaze across the remaining titled Dalu. These two were the weakest among them. However, after seeing him defeat 2 titled Douluo in a row, the remaining titled Douluo were more cautious, but they were also itching to fight him. Let me try. At this moment, the chrysanthemum Douluo slowly walked out. His martial soul was the singular velvet sky chrysanthemum. It was an extremely strong control-type martial soul. Furthermore, he was rank 95, and was a true transcendent Dalu. Half a year ago, the chrysanthemum Douluo had wanted to spar with the white-clothed death god. However, he was too shocked then. After seeing Old Ghost being defeated, he didn't really make a move. But now, he couldn't take it anymore. Little Juju, I think you should be more careful. Gui Douluo chuckled. Although you're also a control-type soul master, and can defend against his soul skills and flying swords, He hasn't even used his martial soul yet. The chrysanthemum Douluo snorted coldly and walked onto the plaza. Elder Ju is a transcendent Douluo, Hulaina muttered under her breath. As a control-type soul master, Elder Ju was very strong. At least, he was very strong against those of the same rank. Bibidon watched quietly, as if he was calculating the white-clothed death god's abilities. "It's you?" The white-clothed death god looked at Elder Ju and said calmly, "Do you still remember what I said half a year ago? Why don't you wash your knees and forehead clean and kowtow today?" Hearing this, Elder Ju snorted coldly. He naturally remembered the agreement from half a year ago. "Let's talk about it after you defeat me," Elder Ju said plainly. After he finished speaking, the singular velvet sky chrysanthemum in his hand suddenly appeared. It turned into a platinum chrysanthemum. A faint fragrance spread across the entire plaza along with the singular velvet sky chrysanthemum. Following this, Elder Ju's 9 soul rings lit up one after another without any hesitation. It seemed like he was about to unleash his soul skill. The white-clothed death god didn't wait either. The flying sword beside him immediately attacked the chrysanthemum Douluo. Soul skill, clear chrysanthemum morning breeze. It was an elegant name, and it seemed to fit the chrysanthemum Douluo's style very well. Countless chrysanthemum petals floated up from his martial soul. After that, they quickly split and multiplied. In just an instant it was raining chrysanthemum flowers. Amidst the falling petals, the flying sword's speed seemed to be greatly hindered. Not only did it slow down, but its accuracy also decreased. Wang Fengxin was slightly shocked. Is this a spiritual type control type soul skill? The dancing petals and the fragrance can greatly affect a soul master's spiritual power. It seemed like his opponent already knew how he was going to kill people with his flying sword. He was going to use his powerful spiritual power to control it. After that, he would immediately target it. Although these effects were not big for Wang Feng, they still affected him. The consequence was that the power of the flying sword was weakened. Perhaps it was not weakened by a lot, but in a battle of this level, even if it was weakened by a little, it was enough to decide the outcome of the battle. Indeed, after seeing that his flying sword was affected, the chrysanthemum Douluo's hand lit up once again. A pitch-black 10,000-year soul ring suddenly lit up. Soul skill, blazing sun chrysanthemum. The chrysanthemum Douluo roared. The stamen in the center of the chrysanthemum Douluo's hand quickly condensed into a streak of blazing light. It split into several streaks and attacked Wang Feng and his flying sword. Chapter 554. This beam of light was very quick, and struck the affected flying sword. On the other hand, Wang Feng easily dodged the beam of light. If he was hit by the beam of light, he would also be injured. This was the benefit of increasing his spiritual power. If it were in the past, Wang Feng would have had to use Spirit Seal to resist the speed of this soul skill, unless he was at the spatial opening realm. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult for him to dodge it. Wang Feng had secretly activated the power of his blood patterns before the battle began. It was just that he hadn't activated his domain yet. The chrysanthemum Douluo was a little surprised when he saw the white-clothed death god dodge. He didn't stop, and the chrysanthemum in his hand lit up again. Another few attacks lit up. His attacks were long-range attacks. Although he was also a tool soul, he was much stronger than the snake spear Douluo. Long-range control-type soul masters weren't easy to deal with. Flying swords, spirit seal, and even ice reflection were all blocked or resisted by their opponent. This was especially so for a long-range control-type soul master like the chrysanthemum Douluo. As long as he didn't get close to Wang Feng, he could easily dodge or defend himself. His singular velvet sky connecting chrysanthemum wasn't like the snake spear, which had to be used to deal with his enemies. It was very difficult to be hit by Spirit Seal. In addition, it had many other effects. The chrysanthemum Douluo seemed very weak in the original novel, but he wasn't weak at all. The singular velvet sky connecting chrysanthemum was an immortal herb. How could it be weak as a martial soul? In terms of plant quality, the singular velvet sky connecting chrysanthemum was only slightly inferior to the blue-silver emperor. The blue-silver emperor should be of the same quality as the yearning heartbroken red. Therefore, the chrysanthemum Douluo was very strong as he possessed the singular velvet sky connecting chrysanthemum. Right now, as the petals in midair slowly fell, the chrysanthemum Douluo could sense any changes in the air. Following this, the singular velvet sky connecting chrysanthemum in his hand became bigger. It became a huge chrysanthemum that was 7 to 8 meters long. His various soul skills, attributes, and soul power were all strengthened. It was his martial soul true body. The chrysanthemum formed a tornado in the plaza, and the white-clothed death god couldn't escape. A streak of dazzling, icy light shot out from Wang Feng's body towards the huge chrysanthemum. However, it was blocked by the chaotic energy tornado, forming a dazzling ice tornado that shattered into countless ice shards. But then, a second tornado formed by countless petals was formed. This was the strength of long-range attacks. He could enjoy strong suppression to his heart's content. As long as Wang Feng used his spirit seal soul skill, the chrysanthemum Douluo would be prepared to unleash his soul skill to block it. As long as one had sufficient understanding of the white-robed death god, one would always be flexible, and the chrysanthemum Douluo was one such example. After all, it was very difficult for a titled Douluo to be struck by the same move, unless the other party was a fool. Wang Feng was not surprised when he saw this. The reason he came to the pontiff's palace and fought these titled Douluo was to let the martial soul hall know how strong the white-clothed death god was. It even helped him reach a very high position in the martial spirit palace. Only after becoming a consecrator in the Elder Hall would they be able to learn a lot of confidential information. Cauldron of Heaven and Earth. Therefore, Wang Feng summoned the Cauldron of Heaven and Earth. A scarlet light suddenly flashed. In order to confuse them, he even deliberately lit up his other two 10,000-year soul rings, making it seem like he only had 3 soul rings. However, as a 100,000-year soul swap, the dazzling light blinded the eyes of many titled Douluo present. Even though the ghost Douluo had mentioned it before, seeing it with their own eyes was completely different. Even the Bibidan was a little shocked. There were only a handful of titled Douluo on the continent who had a 100,000-year soul ring. Every one of them represented a huge amount of potential. Not to mention, he was such a special expert. The light from the Cauldron of Heaven and Earth shone for the first time in the eyes of so many titled Douluo. Soul skill, divine light of heaven and earth! Wang Feng shouted, and the Cauldron of Heaven and Earth in his hand started to spin rapidly. Following this, a streak of 7-colored divine light shone from the cauldron. This divine light passed through the tornado and landed on the huge singular velvet sky chrysanthemum, as if it was not affected by the tornado at all. Wang Feng's 5th soul skill finally revealed its brilliance. In the next moment, the dazzling singular velvet sky chrysanthemum, which exuded a chrysanthemum fragrance and a platinum-colored light, started to shrink at a visible speed. It was as if it had been shone on by Doraemon's shrinking lamp, and was rapidly shrinking. Wang Feng was also watching. This was the first time Wang Feng had used his 5th soul skill on a titled Douluo. It was also the first time he had truly used his divine light of heaven and earth. This light landed very quickly, and it was not affected by the tornado at all. Furthermore, the singular velvet sky chrysanthemum was extremely huge, and there was no chance for him to dodge at all. He was hit, and even the chrysanthemum Douluo could not react in time. In just a few seconds, the singular velvet sky chrysanthemum turned into a palm-sized chrysanthemum. The light dimmed. It was like a wild chrysanthemum on the side of the road. Seeing this, everyone was stunned, and their mouths were wide open as they watched. Even the Bibidon was a little astonished as he watched. Is this martial soul degradation? Seal? None of them had seen such a magical soul skill before. The chrysanthemum Douluo was the most astonished. He watched as his singular velvet sky chrysanthemum turned into a small wild chrysanthemum. Who would be able to endure this? What was even more frightening was that the chrysanthemum Douluo felt as if he could not use his soul skills at all. What kind of soul skill is this? The chrysanthemum Douluo swallowed his saliva. How was he going to fight this? All of his soul skills required the singular velvet sky chrysanthemum to unleash their powers. A small wild chrysanthemum could not withstand the power of a soul ring at all. That rainbow-colored divine light was too terrifying. It was important to note that the singular velvet sky chrysanthemum was still in its martial soul true body state, but it had degenerated after being engulfed by the rainbow divine light. This was a martial soul true body. Even a martial soul in its strongest state could not resist it. Who could withstand it in a fight? The divine light of heaven and earth did not disappoint me. Wang Feng nodded in his heart as he looked at the small wild chrysanthemum. It's a pity. If only the divine light of heaven and earth could evolve my martial soul. Right now, the degeneration effect was enough to clinch victory. Silence. Everyone present was silent. Even the ghost Douluo had not seen the divine light of heaven and earth before, let alone them. It was 100,000-year soul skill from the cauldron of heaven and earth, and it was unimaginably powerful. Everyone was astonished. Even the Bibidon was a little astonished. This soul skill was too terrifying. The rainbow divine light covered a huge area. As long as it was a martial soul true body, it would be very difficult to dodge. This was because most titled Douluo's martial soul true body would become extremely huge, and they would be able to withstand this attack. Unless they did not use their martial soul true body, their powers would be greatly reduced. Chapter 555. Once one was hit, the blow would be fatal. The deterioration of one's martial soul was equivalent to sealing all of one's soul skills. Even if one forcefully used them, they wouldn't be very powerful. It was a godly skill. It was extremely important in any battle. The entire place was silent for more than 10 seconds. Even the singular velvet sky connecting chrysanthemum couldn't react in time. The chrysanthemum Douluo stared at the white-clothed Grim Reaper. With such a soul skill, it meant that any titled Douluo would face the threat of having their martial soul deteriorate. It was the same for beast souls. This was because beast souls had to be possessed. Once they deteriorated, their various enhancements to the soul master would be greatly reduced. The chrysanthemum Douluo calculated that it wouldn't last for long. It would only last for 7 to 8 seconds. However, during this period, the chrysanthemum Douluo felt worse than if he had eaten **T. He watched as his martial soul turned into a little chrysanthemum. I admit defeat. The chrysanthemum Douluo sighed. The white-clothed Grim Reaper was too strong. Once he used his 100,000-year soul skill, the other titled Douluo had to think twice. Initially, he had the upper hand. He could barely suppress his opponent with his various soul skills. However, it was impossible now. Just that short period of time was enough for the other party to use flying to defeat him. After the chrysanthemum Douluo was defeated, his 100,000-year soul skill shone brightly. The other Douluo started to retreat. A soul skill that could reduce the quality of one's martial soul was too difficult to deal with. However, titled Douluo were titled Dalu. They wouldn't back down so easily. Following this, 2 more titled Douluo walked out. Their martial souls were the coiling dragon staff. Their titles were Qianjun. These 2 brothers were rank 96 Transcendent Dalu. They were among the top titled Douluo in the Elders' Hall. They were from the Elders' Hall. However, Bibidon had already unified the martial soul hall. Even the Elders' Hall's consecrated elders obeyed Bibidon. Only the transcendent Douluo didn't care about anything. However, these two titled Douluo were very strong. The ghost Douluo was one rank lower than the two of them. This difference in rank was huge. However, these two couldn't defeat the white-clothed Grim Reaper. As soon as the Qianquan divine light appeared, the 1,000 Jun Douluo's coiling dragon staff was reduced to a round wooden stick. He couldn't even unleash his martial soul true body. The demon-subduing Douluo behind him had learned his lesson and decided not to unleash his martial soul true body. That way, he could just barely evade the rainbow divine light. Even if a titled Douluo didn't unleash their martial soul true bodies, their fighting prowess was still very strong. Furthermore, the demon-subduing Douluo had already taken precautions against his opponent's various abilities, so he was able to hold his own against the white-robed death god. This also allowed everyone to understand the strength of this white-clothed god of death. In the end, Wang Feng relied on his original sin's domain to barely defeat the demon-subduing Douluo. If Wang Feng had unleashed his original sin's domain, he would have been able to resist it to a large extent. However, his original sin's domain was not complete and he had not cultivated it for the past 6 months. Hence, it had not become much stronger. However, the demon-slaying Douluo hadn't unleashed his martial soul true body, so he was at a huge disadvantage. He was directly struck by Wang Feng's soul-sealing skill, and was sent flying by Wang Feng's explosive hammer strikes. However, the demon-vanquishing Douluo's physique was much stronger than the ghost Douluo's. He did not suffer any serious injuries. Wang Feng couldn't help but sigh. The gap between them was too huge. The ghost Douluo had almost lost his fighting strength after being beaten up by him, but the demon-vanquishing Douluo had only suffered some light injuries. Of course, this had a lot to do with their martial souls. The ghost Douluo's defense was extremely weak, but it had a certain degree of immunity to damage, which made up for this weakness. However, it was easily countered by spiritual seal. Although the demon-vanquishing Douluo had a tool soul, his physique was extremely strong. Even in its normal form, the coiling dragon staff weighed at least a few thousand kilograms, or even more than 10,000 kilograms. His martial soul true body might even weigh several times more. He often used this weapon to train his body, so his physique was naturally not inferior to beast soul masters. In fact, he was even stronger. It was a narrow victory. The last person to step forward was a golden-haired elder. His martial soul was a golden crocodile, and he was an assault type titled Dalu. He was at the peak of rank 97, and was only one step away from rank 98. Given Wang Feng's current state, he had his original sin's domain, his blood pattern power, his cauldron of heaven and earth, and his 100,000-year torso bone. Naturally, he couldn't defeat this rank 97 titled Dalu. In fact, he was still very far from it. Unless he used his other 4 forms, he could only be in his full form. If he wanted to kill the other party, it would be impossible. Defeating him and killing him were two different concepts. Wang Feng could defeat the Chrysanthemum Douluo and the Ghost Douluo, but it would be very difficult for him to kill them. A titled Douluo's life force was very strong. Once they fought with their lives on the line, it wouldn't be a simple fight anymore. It was just like the fight with the Ghost Douluo half a year ago. If the Ghost Douluo knew Wang Feng's abilities beforehand, he would have used all sorts of statuses and used his 8th and 9th soul skills without any regard for his own life. Wang Feng estimated that he would need to be at least rank 60 to be able to defeat a rank 97 titled Dalu. He would probably need to be at least rank 70, or even rank 80 to be able to defeat a titled Douluo at rank 98 and 99. Furthermore, the Golden Crocodile Douluo was the second consecrated of the Martial Soul Hall. His abilities were comparable to the Sword Douluo, who was also at rank 97, and he was even slightly stronger. This was because the golden crocodile Douluo was already at the peak of rank 97, and was only 1 or 2 years away from rank 98. Wang Feng had to be defeated by an opponent of this caliber. The golden crocodile Douluo was so strong that even Wang Feng's spirit seal could only seal him for less than 2 seconds. The strength of his flying sword couldn't even leave a mark on his body. His defensive abilities were terrifying. Even after consuming the universal divine light, his martial soul had deteriorated. The flying sword could only leave a very small mark on his body. One could only imagine how tough his physical body was. Wang Feng's soul skills were useless against the golden crocodile Douluo, who hadn't even unleashed his martial soul true body. Eventually, he relied on his ice reflection to prevent the golden crocodile Douluo from injuring him. The fight only ended when there wasn't a single drop of soul power left. "You're the most durable soul master I've ever seen." In the end, the golden crocodile Douluo couldn't help but say this. However, this was already very perverse. This was because the white-clothed death god had challenged 5 titled Douluo in a row, including the ghost Douluo, who had already been defeated. 6 titled Douluo had been defeated by the white-clothed death god. After fighting for so long, he was still able to fight the rank 97 golden crocodile Douluo without any injuries. In the end, he was defeated by the exhaustion of his soul power. This was ridiculously strong. The key was that his opponent had great potential. This was because he had a 100,000-year soul ring. After the fight, the group of people watched in silence. Everyone's expressions had changed from indifference to shock, seriousness, and even admiration. This white-clothed death god was indeed very strong. With his abilities, he could be ranked in the top 5 in the Martial Soul Hall. Huliana's eyes were already filled with stars as she stood behind Bibidon. Too strong. How can he be so strong? Chapter 556. In the capital of Massacre, she felt that Wang Wu's abilities should be around that of a Soul Doulu. However, after coming out of Hell's Road, he even defeated the Ghost Elder. Half a year later, he came to the Pope's palace on time and challenged 5 titled Doulu. He displayed his powerful abilities step by step. In the end, he forced the second consecrator to take action before he could suppress him. Huliana did not expect such a situation. Amidst all the emotions, her eyes were filled with admiration. Good, good, good. Bibidon finally opened her mouth. Her dignified voice had a rare hint of warmth. Bibidon looked at the white-clothed Grim Reaper in the center of the plaza. Nicholas Wang Wu. What a simple name. A mysterious powerhouse who came from the extreme north could actually be so powerful. His cultivation method, soul bones, soul skills, martial soul, soul rings, and so on could be said to be the strongest and most unique existence that she had seen in all these years. Compared to 4 years ago, Jiui Kai was not inferior at all. In fact, he was much stronger. Most importantly, he had saved Nana before. This meant that he did not hate the Martial Soul Hall. The Ghost Douluo and Chrysanthemum Douluo had also handled things well. They had put all the blame on the 2 of them. It also gave her a chance to recruit him to fill the gap. With such a powerful main force, as long as she kept him in the Martial Soul Hall, her future plan would succeed. Bibidon thought to herself. She had to admit that watching the white-clothed Grim Reaper fight 6 consecutive battles gave her a different feeling every time. Wang Wu, are you really willing to join the Martial Soul Hall? Bibidon wore a smile on his face as he led the 7 titled Douluo to the plaza. Wang Fengxin was secretly on guard. If they were not careful, he would immediately use instant teleportation to escape. Thinking back to the 6 battles, Wang Fengxin had already rehearsed them, except for the last battle against the Golden Alligator Doulu. The pressure from the rank 97 titled Douluo was beyond Wang Feng's imagination. The other 5 battles were all within Wang Feng's expectations. I promise that as long as you are sincere in joining the Martial Soul Hall, you will be my subordinate. Your position will only be below mine. I will give you the position of Popetiff in the Martial Soul Hall as the white-clothed Popetiff. At the same time, I will apply to the Elder Council to appoint you as the third consecrator of the Elder Hall. Bibidon looked at the white-clothed Grim Reaper in front of her. Wang Feng's heart skipped a beat. The Martial Spirit Palace actually had two main forces, the Pontiff Palace and the Elder's Palace. The consecrator, of course, the consecrator of the Soul Hall's consecrator. Among the elders, the consecrator of the elders. Pope Bibidong had been working hard for the past few years, and had won over many elders in the Martial Spirit Palace to listen to her orders. By the by the Douluo of the by. Of the by. To put it simply, Wang Feng understood the relationship between the ZF and Mao Zedong. The consecrator of the Pope was the Bibidon. It was Wang Feng's first time hearing of the Popetiff's position. But it was only below the Pope. Just this point alone was enough to prove that Bibidon wanted to win him over. The Elders' Hall couldn't be bypassed, so he had to have a position in the Elders' Hall. However, no matter which one it was, they were both above everyone else. The golden alligator Douluo frowned slightly when he heard this, but he didn't say anything. The white-clothed Grim Reaper did have such strength. It was just that Bibidon was too presumptuous to make such a promise. Popetiff's position also needed to be discussed by the elders in the Elders' Hall. The Pope only had the right to choose. In the consecrator of the Pope's Hall, this position was the highest position other than the Pope. Bibidon obviously wanted to nurture the white-clothed Grim Reaper into a confidant. Hulina, who was behind, also opened her eyes wide and looked at Wang Feng without blinking. She naturally knew about Popetiff's position. In the history of the Martial Spirit Palace, Popetiff was actually equivalent to the Pope. It was just that with the slow development of the Martial Spirit Palace, they split into two different positions. Popetiff's position was already half abolished. Especially after Bibidon took over, this title was completely abolished. She didn't expect her teacher to take out this position again as a promise. This was enough to prove that her teacher really valued Wang Wu very much. Thinking of this, Hulina blushed and looked at the white-clothed Grim Reaper with sparkling eyes. It doesn't matter if it's a position or not. I'm just here because I'm interested in the Martial Spirit Palace. I just want to join the Martial Spirit Palace. Now I do feel that the Martial Spirit Palace is a little interesting. Wang Feng still said indifferently, as if he didn't know how noble this position was. Bibidon wanted to win him over and make him his confidant. That couldn't be better. It wasn't a waste of his sincerity and planning for so long. Of course, this position couldn't be taken so easily. It was just a promise, and it didn't mean that Bibidon would really tell him everything. But at least he was close to the biggest villain in the original work. Wang Feng even thought that with Bibidon's position, he would definitely give him various tests. Once he found something wrong. But anyway, with this position, he could definitely get in touch with some secrets of the Martial Spirit Palace. Good. Hearing the answer, Bibidon's smile became bigger. Then, I have shown my sincerity. Wang Wu, you should also show your sincerity. What sincerity? Wang Feng asked. Bibidon smiled and pointed at the mask on Wang Feng's face. This, you should take it off. Because Popetiff of the Martial Spirit Palace can't show his face with a mask. Don't worry, even if there is any chronic disease on your face, the Martial Spirit Palace will cure you and give you the most perfect image. Wang Feng smiled secretly. This was Bibidon's test. Wang Feng, who had watched countless spy movies in his previous life, was not surprised at all. Also your age. Bibidon continued. Hearing these two sentences, Hulina's heart tightened. Naturally, she was the most curious one. What you said is not a problem. Wang Feng said, age. I am about 40 years old this year. 7 titled Douluo, plus Bibidon, 8 of them were staring at Wang Feng. As long as there was a problem with what he said, it would arouse suspicion. But when Wang Feng said it, there was no change in his expression. Adding up the 2 lives, he was indeed almost 40 years old. Naturally, he didn't mean to lie. He is already 40 years old? Hulaina's heart trembled. 40 years old was still the golden age for a soul master. Back then, the vast sky Douluo also became a titled Douluo in his 40s. And now, the white-clothed death god, who was not even 40 years old, had the strength of a rank 96 titled Douluo. My cultivation realm is different from ordinary soul masters. Can you judge it by the level of ordinary soul power? Wang Feng continued. My strength, I think you have seen it, several titled Douluo nodded. Absorbing all kinds of emotions to cultivate was indeed different from ordinary soul master's meditation to cultivate soul power. But when he heard that the other party was not even 40 years old, Bibidon was delighted. This white-clothed death god's talent was even more terrifying than the vast sky Douluo's. As for the mask, of course, Wang Feng said calmly, I don't have any chronic disease on my face. The reason why I wear a mask is that I told the girl behind you in Massacre City. I just don't want to shock the world. Since you want to know, then take a look. After saying that, Wang Feng took off the seamless mask with a whoosh. P.S. Seeing so many readers trying to kill me in the game. I can only say that it's useless. The game I play with my friends is a game from many years ago. It's not a battle-type game. I should be playing games with my friends for the next 2 nights. I guarantee that I will update at least 6 times. If you don't want to play, I will update 2 more times, also. I don't eat bat sashimi. End of chapter. Chapter 557. Wang Feng's current appearance was completely different from 4.5 years ago. Therefore, Wang Feng didn't have any considerations when he showed it to the people from the martial spirit palace. The reason why he wore the mask was actually very simple. He just didn't want to shock the world on the surface. Now that Bibidon wanted him to show his sincerity, there was naturally no problem. Wang Feng happened to be waiting for this. In fact, one's appearance was very important. Once it was revealed, it was very difficult to hide in front of a titled Douluo with a simple disguise or slight change of body shape. Even if Wang Feng used one of the 4 great evil techniques in his previous life, the makeup technique, to deceive ordinary people, it was very unlikely to work on a titled Douluo. This was also the reason why he had to wear the mask. As long as Wang Feng's appearance made Bibidon feel that something was wrong, the result would be different. Therefore, Bibidon needed to see the appearance of this white-clothed Grim Reaper. However, no one would have thought that Wang Feng's dustless glass body had undergone an earth-shaking change after being tempered by the Red Lotus. The moment the mask was lifted, there seemed to be a ray of light that bloomed from the mask. In an instant, the world became still. The clouds in the sky rolled up shyly. The sunlight crazily spread on the white figure. The surrounding wind also blew away shyly. Sometimes it couldn't help but want to turn back and form a breeze, blowing the snow-white clothes. The flowers around the square also revealed their stamens to the white figure. It was as if he was the sun, causing them to be borne towards the sun. Almost instantly, the moment when they saw the face of the white-clothed Grim Reaper, everyone's mind went blank. A sentence involuntarily appeared in their minds. How could there be such a good-looking person in the world? His facial features seemed to be even more exquisite than the most exquisite parts in the world, but there was also a natural feeling to them, as if they were just like that, without a single flaw. However, upon closer inspection, they felt that they were incomparably mysterious and hard to figure out. His eyes seemed to hide the universe, the sun, the moon, and the galaxy. It was hard to extricate oneself from just one look and be immersed in it. The pure aura poured out. Even the evilest and most evil person in the world would feel close to him. Bring disaster to the country and the people? Turn all living things upside down? A few words appeared in Hulayina's mind. Too handsome. How could there be such a good-looking person in this world? Hulayina stared at Wang Wu in a daze. So what he said was true. When he said that he was unwilling to take off his mask, it was indeed because he was too handsome. With such a face, if he were to walk on the streets, it would be difficult for him to move an inch. She wasn't the only one. Everyone else present felt the same way. However, as titled Douluo, they were more astonished by Wang Wu's aura, which resonated with heaven and earth, than by Wang Wu's handsomeness. After becoming a titled Douluo, one would naturally have a different understanding of heaven and earth. But now, looking at Wang Wu, they felt that his aura was really mysterious. It actually gave them a natural feeling. Just like what he said, shocking the world. Bibidon was also a little shocked. Appearance was one aspect, but more importantly, temperament. Even she couldn't help but feel a sense of closeness. It was like a natural feeling. However, this feeling of closeness was quickly dispelled by her. This Wang Wu is too special. Bibidon couldn't help but take a deep breath. His charm is simply unfathomable. Not to mention women, even men and all kinds of soul beasts will be attracted to him. No wonder he can survive in the extreme north. As she spoke, Bibidon looked at her disciple, who was completely mesmerized. She couldn't help but think to herself, indeed. With Na's charm and foresight, who hadn't she seen in the martial soul hall? She didn't change at all in the capital of massacre. Now she was also mesmerized. Bibidon thought that if she were a few decades younger, she wouldn't be much better than Hulayina. However, she had experienced so many ups and downs now. She had the abilities of a titled Douluo, so she wouldn't be affected to this extent. Cough cough. At this moment, Wang Feng put on his mask again. It was as if the boundless light was covered. Is this sincerity okay? Bibidon was silent for a moment. There weren't many doubts in her heart anymore. The other titled Douluo also regained their senses and looked at each other. Compared to the other party's charm, they were naturally more shocked by the white-robed death god's aura. Especially when combined with his appearance, it gave people a feeling that he was a perfect whole. From today onwards, you are the Popetiff of the Pontiff's palace. Your name is White-Robed Popetiff. Without hesitation, Bibidon waved the scepter in her hand lightly. A clear voice resounded in the huge Pontiff's palace and pierced through the clouds. Popetiff's position was high, second only to the Pontiff. His appointment naturally had to be announced to the entire continent. Almost on the second day, official documents were distributed from the Pontiff's palace to all the martial soul halls on the continent. Suddenly, the entire continent was shocked. Whether it was the two empires or the 7 great sects, they were all shocked by the mysterious appearance of white-robed Popetiff. What this position represented, as long as one was in the upper echelons, they knew. If it was in the past, he would be on the same level as the Pontiff. Now, the position that had been abolished by Pontiff Bibidon was restored, and it was restored by Pontiff Bibidon himself. One could imagine what this white-robed Popetiff represented. For a moment, the entire continent was filled with rumors about the new white-robed Popetiff of the martial soul hall. Some said that he was a secret weapon that the Pontiff had secretly nurtured. Once he woke up, his strength would shock everyone. Some said that this unknown person was recruited by the Pontiff. A giant dragon went out to sea, one below 10,000 people. Some even said that he might be an illegitimate child, or the Pontiff's, without much strength. Of course, these rumors were the wild guesses of most soul masters who didn't know about the world. Anyone with a little brain would know that the Popetiff's position couldn't be taken without strength. What's more, he was personally appointed by Bibidon and promoted to this position. Especially the 2 empires and the 7 great sects, these forces were very familiar with the martial soul hall. It was simply shocking to the bone. There was no doubt that the appearance of this white-robed Popetiff instantly added a layer of fog to the turbulent continent, making it difficult for people to see the situation. The entire continent was guessing who this white-robed Popetiff was. Heaven-Do City, Moon Pavilion. Half a year ago, Tang San followed his father to this place. According to his father, he needed to settle down, calm his mind, and wash away the killing intent in his body. Here, Tang San also met his father's younger sister, who was also his aunt Tang Yuehua. In half a year, Tang Yuehua taught Tang San a lot of noble etiquette and various knowledge of the continent. She also slowly calmed down Tang San's heart, which was tainted with all kinds of negative emotions in the capital of slaughter, and his temperament became more mellow and elegant. End of chapter. Chapter 558. On this day, in a room in the Moon Pavilion, Tang San finished his homework for the day and slowly stood up. His eyes fell on Heaven-Do City, which was shrouded in clouds outside the window. Today's fog was particularly thick. The door was opened and Tang Yuehua walked in. Tang San turned around, knowing that his aunt had come to check on his homework. But when he turned around, he found that his aunt, who was usually elegant and calm, was frowning deeply today. "Aunt, what's wrong?" Tang San asked in surprise. Normally, he had never seen his aunt show any signs of worry. She had always maintained a calm and elegant posture. Apart from the time when she saw his father bring him here, she had never shown any other expression during the time when Xiang Yu was teaching him. "There's bad news." Tang Yuehua sighed. "Bad news from the Martial Spirit Palace." Hearing this, Tang San's heart skipped a beat. Although his father had told him about his mother, Tang San had already guessed that the Martial Spirit Palace was his #1 enemy now. Fortunately, his appearance had changed. Otherwise, he might have been discovered by the Martial Spirit Palace by now. "What's the bad news?" Tang San asked in a deep voice. Tang Yuehua glanced at Tang San and said in a low voice, "I just got the news today. Yesterday, the Martial Spirit City's Pontiff Palace announced to the whole continent that Popetiff was reinstated. In the history of the Martial Spirit Palace, Popetiff's position is second only to the Pontiff. It has been abolished, but now it's reinstated. You can imagine." Tang San was shocked when he heard this. In the past 6 months, his aunt had taught him a lot of knowledge, so he naturally knew about the Popetiff's position. "Who's the Popetiff?" Tang San continued to ask. Tang Yuehua shook her head. The Pontiff Palace didn't say in detail. They only gave him the name, White Popetiff. He's extremely mysterious, but no matter how mysterious he is, this White Popetiff is very strong. The Martial Spirit Palace's strength has increased again. Tang Yuehua whispered, "But Xiao San, don't be affected." Popetiff in white. White? Tang San's heart skipped a beat. Could it be the god of death in white? He had saved Huliena twice. It was not impossible for the Martial Spirit Palace to recruit him. However, the other party's character didn't seem like the kind of person who would be easily recruited. Perhaps Pope Bibidon had used some special means? Although he couldn't be sure if it was true, the Martial Spirit Palace had indeed become more powerful. According to his father's conjecture, the white-clothed god of death, Wang Wu, was ridiculously strong. He was at least a titled Douluo. Moreover, he was too young to fight. His potential was terrifying, and his future was immeasurable. "I hope not," Tang San heaved a long sigh in his heart. In addition, this white-robed Popetiff is also the third consecrator of the Hall of Elders. Tang Yuehua said in a low voice, "Only titled Douluo have the ability to enter the Elder's Palace. To become an Elder, one must be extremely powerful. The Martial Spirit Palace didn't publicize this, but I can imagine that the other party is very powerful." Tang San was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. He also knew about the Elder's Palace. After this white-robed Popetiff took office, the Pope ordered him to visit all the martial spirit palaces on the continent in the name of inspection to establish his prestige. Tang Yuehua continued, at most, in a few months, he may come to the martial spirit palace in Heaven Do City. At that time, the Heaven Do Empire's imperial family will pay great attention to him. Recently, there has only been a little girl from the imperial family by your side, right? Maintain a good relationship with her. When the time comes, you may be able to meet this white-robed Pope. Tang San nodded and didn't refuse. Ant's Moon Pavilion specialized in cultivating the children of noble families. He could come into contact with many imperial families. Recently, a girl from the imperial family often came to see him. Ant said that she seemed to be the little princess of the Heaven Do imperial family. If it was in the past, Tang San would naturally disdain her. He only had Xiao Wu in his heart, so he wouldn't speak bluntly to any woman. But now, he was able to talk with her with ease. However, there was no change in his heart. Just as Ant said, maintaining a good relationship with her was the only way to borrow power. I hope I can meet this white-robed Pope when the time comes. Inspecting the martial spirit palaces on the continent in the name of Pope. It seems that the Pope is cultivating this white-robed Pope as his confidant. 7 Treasure Glazed Tile Sect, Main Hall. Ning Fengji frowned slightly. More than 4 years had passed, but Ning Fengji didn't seem to have changed at all. He was still as calm and elegant as before. Beside him, the Bone Douluo and Sword Douluo didn't change much either. At their age and strength, most of their appearances were already fixed. It was difficult for them to change. Uncle Jian, you're also an honorary elder in the Martial Spirit Palace. Have you seen this white-robed Pope? How strong is he? Ning Fengji looked at the Sword Douluo. The Sword Douluo thought for a moment and said, I don't know the details, but I know that the second consecrator of the Elder's Palace is slightly stronger than me. Pope's position needs to be appointed by the Pope, but the third consecrator of the Elder's Palace needs the approval of many titled Dalu. Even the Pope can't interfere with this. This white-robed Pope's strength shouldn't be inferior to mine. But to be so valued means that he has great potential. His identity is special, and he must be very young. Every titled Douluo was closely related to the Martial Spirit Palace. Most of them were recorded. The inspection also wants to show off. It seems that the Martial Spirit Palace is ready to make a move. The Bone Douluo sighed. Ning Fengji was silent. It wasn't just these 4 years. He could feel the Martial Spirit Palace's intention in the past few years. 2 words, ambition. Now that this white-clothed Pope had appeared out of nowhere, who knew what sort of change would occur in the current situation? By the way, it's been more than 4 years. Is there any news about that kid? Ning Fengji suddenly asked. Hearing this, the Bone Douluo and the Sword Douluo were stunned. The Sword Douluo's eyes flashed with a look of reminiscence. Then, they shook their heads. Seeing this, Ning Fengji couldn't help but sigh. Fengji, how has Rongrong been recently? The Bone Douluo hesitated for a moment and asked. He was in charge of the Pope's palace, and he went there. But Ning Fengji and the Sword Douluo had already told him the details. Naturally, he knew everything. Good. Ning Fengji whispered, over the past 4 years, besides the first year when she was very quiet, she was completely normal for the next few years. She also worked harder and became more mature. It can be said that, I've never seen such a good Rongrong. But she's too good and I'm even more worried. Over the past 4 years, she didn't mention anything about that kid. I thought she had forgotten about him. It was only when she built a small town in Soto City last year that I realized that she didn't forget at all. I'm afraid her feelings for him are even deeper. End of chapter. Chapter 559. At this point, Ning Fengji let out a long sigh. The only thing she's looking forward to now is the promised time in a few months, because 5 years ago, the 8 of them agreed that they would reunite at the Shrek Academy. This was also the reason why I persuaded her back then. I'm afraid that when the time comes, Rongrong won't be able to see that kid. I wonder how sad she'll be. The worry in Ningfengji's voice caused the two titled Douluo to fall silent. They were all experienced people who had experienced many ups and downs. Naturally, they knew why Rongrong had become better and better over the past 4 years. It was because she wanted to become better so that she could see the person she loved. If she found out in the end that it was all fake, she would definitely suffer a huge blow. She might not even be able to recover from this setback. As they thought of this, the three of them frowned. At this moment, a lively figure suddenly walked in from outside the hall. Father, Grandpa Jian, Grandpa Gu, you're all here? Why do you all look so sad? A lively figure walked in from the outside, bringing with her a fragrant wind. Even her voice seemed to be filled with joy. It was Ning Rongrong. When the three of them saw Ning Rongrong, they were stunned. This girl hadn't returned to the sect for a few months. Why did she come back now? Rongrong, why are you so happy? Ning Fengji looked at Ning Rongrong, who was smiling from the bottom of her heart. He hadn't seen such a sincere smile in a long time. Father, it seems like you didn't lie to me. Ning Rongrong's smile became a little redder. You said that Wang Feng would come to see me first. I didn't expect him to really come. Hearing this, Ning Fengji and the two Douluo were shocked. You saw him? Ning Fengji almost blurted out. How could he still be alive? Fortunately, he swallowed his words halfway through. No. Ning Rongrong took out 2 wooden carvings from her bosom and said happily, but these were given to me by him. I'm the only one who knows who these 2 wooden carvings are, and the other one is what he and I look like after using our martial soul fusion skill. He asked someone to give it to me outside Feng Town. He must have come to see me. I'll be able to see him in a few months. As she spoke, Ning Rongrong gently jumped and spun in circles as she walked into the room at the back of the hall. Seeing this, the three of them looked at each other, not knowing what to say. Uncle Jian, Uncle Gu, were those 2 statues made by the 2 of you? Ning Fengji asked in a low voice. I don't know. I don't think so. However, it might be Grandmaster and the others. The sword Douluo replied softly. Ning Fengji sighed softly. Just 2 wooden carvings and this girl is already so happy. The happier she is now, I'm afraid that when the time comes, what could 2 wooden carvings prove? It couldn't prove anything. It was completely because this girl's yearning for him had reached the limit. As long as she saw anything related to that brat, she would believe it completely. Otherwise, how could the 7 treasure glaze tile sect not have any news after searching for so long for the past 4 years? Thinking of this, the 3 of them sighed in unison. White-clothed Popetiff's inspection of the continent's martial spirit hall could be said to have shocked the world. In just a short month, this white-clothed Popetiff set off from the martial spirit hall and inspected the martial spirit halls in various cities of the 2 empires. Everywhere he went, all the members of the martial spirit hall bowed down to him and were all intimidated by his strength. Appointed by the Pope with a high status, terrifying strength, arrogant and peerless, countless labels were attached to this white-clothed Popetiff. Even though many ordinary soul masters couldn't see him, they knew that this white-clothed Popetiff wasn't like the rumors, who relied on various connections to reach his position. He had true strength. Heaven Do Empire. 200 meters in midair, on a 3-meter-long and 2-meter-wide flying sword. 5 people were standing on the flying sword. The flying sword was very fast, but the 4 of them had formed a soul power barrier that was able to isolate them from the whistling winds outside. The man in the lead was dressed in a white robe with golden threads. He wore a mask and sat cross-legged. This man was the white-clothed Popetiff, Nicholas Wang Wu, whose name had shaken the continent. Lord Popetiff, we will reach Elephant Armor City in an hour's time. A red-robed bishop said respectfully. Popetiff naturally had his own entourage for his inspection. However, Lord Popetiff didn't like too many people, so there were only 4 people standing on the flying sword. One of them was a red-robed bishop, one was the Pope's personal disciple, Hulaina, and one was the strongest in the martial spirit hall, Evil Moon and Yen. They were the 3 members of the Golden Generation. They were sent by Bibidon to follow and learn from the white-clothed Pope. This red-robed bishop was a rank 83 soul Doulu. His martial soul was his own bronze statue called Thomas. There weren't many red-robed bishops in the martial spirit hall. They were scattered across the main cities of the 2 empires. There were more than 10 red-robed bishops in the martial spirit hall, so there were less than 60 red-robed bishops in total. They were all soul sages, and there were many soul Douluo among them. Logically speaking, Wang Feng was a little shocked when he heard this number. Soul sages and soul Douluo were only second to titled Dalu. There were almost 60 of them in the martial spirit hall. This was a very large number. It had been more than a month since Wang Feng became the white-clothed Pope. Wang Feng had spent most of his time in the Pope's palace over the past month to understand all kinds of information about the martial spirit hall. Bibidon would occasionally look for him to discuss some matters. In the end, Bibidon would set his next goal for him. During these days, Wang Feng had a clearer outline of the martial spirit hall's internal structure. However, it was obvious that Bibidon hadn't let Wang Feng come into contact with the most crucial information, so he set this goal for Wang Feng. He would patrol the martial spirit hall on the continent and visit the 7 major sects at the same time. He wanted him to show some of his strength in front of the 2 empires and those sects to strengthen the authority and influence of the martial spirit hall on the continent. The goal was very clear. At the same time, it was also Bibidon's second test for him. Wang Feng roughly knew that when he returned, Bibidon would probably tell him her real plan. He would become Bibidon's true confidant. It would also be considered that Wang Feng had truly entered the inner circle of the martial spirit hall. In the beginning, Wang Feng arrogantly refused in order to deepen his character setting. In the end, Bibidon said that when you fight with the continent's powerful individuals, you can experience the emotions of different powerful individuals and improve your cultivation. Only then did the white-clothed Pope Wang Wu agree. In fact, although Bibidon appointed him as the white-clothed Pope, the martial spirit hall and the 7 major sects were secretly speculating. He indeed needed to make a trip out. Wang Feng also wanted to see how much strength the martial spirit hall was hiding. Also, what were the specific strengths of the 4 lower sects that were closely related to the martial spirit hall. The 4 lower sects were Elephant Armor Sect, Medicine Spirit Sect, Qi Cauldron Sect, and Battle Luo Sect. End of chapter. Chapter 560. The Strength of the Martial Soul Hall. 4. Wang Feng remembered that the original novel only mentioned the Elephant Armor Sect. He didn't read the rest of the story, so he didn't know if the other sects had appeared. However, these were the 4 sects that he had heard about. It was Bibidon who told him about them. Besides the Elephant Armor Sect, the other 3 sects were special. They didn't establish their own academies. They didn't send their own teams to the tournament either. However, Wang Feng discovered that Zhang Xiaotian was actually a disciple of the Battle Luo sect. However, he left the Battle Luo sect and joined the Ares Academy. There was very little information about the Battle Luo sect in the Star Luo Empire. Even the imperial family didn't know about it. The Medicine Spirit sect and the Qi Cauldron sect were also in the Star Luo Empire. The Elephant Armor sect, the 7 Treasure Glazed Tile sect, and the Blue Lightning Overlord sect were all in the Heaven Do Empire. The remaining Clear Sky sect was more mysterious. Members of the Martial Soul Hall couldn't enter it. However, it was clear that these 4 sects had their own characteristics. They were able to be ranked as one of the 7 sections. Furthermore, according to information, the Battle Luo sect had a titled Doulu. They were ranked first among the 4 sections. These 4 sects were only close to the martial soul hall now. They weren't completely subservient to the martial soul hall. However, they were still partially dependent on the martial soul hall. Wang Feng only found out about this after joining the martial soul hall. Most people didn't know about these 4 sects, especially the 3 sects in the Star Luo Empire. The distribution of titled Douluo is too uneven. After understanding the situation on the continent, Wang Feng was in disbelief. There were too many titled Douluo in the martial soul hall. Wang Feng had spent most of his time in the Heaven Do Empire. However, the titled Douluo in the Heaven Do Empire, excluding the 7 sects, was old poison? Wang Feng had never heard of any other titled Douluo in the Heaven Do Empire. It was the same in the Star Luo Empire. There were very few soul Douluo, let alone titled Douluo. How did these 2 empires survive? Apart from that, many martial soul halls in the martial soul hall were guarded by bishop. They were at least rank 60. Red-robed bishops were all above rank 70, and there were many soul Douluo among them. Above them were platinum bishops, who were the most powerful soul Douluo and had a chance of becoming a titled Doulu. For the cities that Wang Feng had visited in the past 10 days, his flying speed was very fast. In addition, he could visit 1 city a day near the Martial Spirit Palace. There were many rank 40 and rank 50 soul masters in the Martial Soul Branch Palace. In the main cities of those kingdoms, the Martial Soul Palace was filled with rank 60 and rank 70 soul masters. These people were all on the surface. Any soul master would be able to see it. Wang Feng found that the strength of Martial Spirit Palace on the surface was powerful enough. Let's not talk about anything else. Similar to the Temple Knights, special soul master units that were tasked with protecting the city had countless soul masters in their middle rank. The Holy Knights of the Pontiff's Palace started at rank 60, and some of them could even reach rank 80. There were even titled Douluo among them. In the original novel, how did Tang San and the others win? Wang Feng was deeply puzzled. The Martial Spirit Palace had too many high-end combat power, but there were also many low-end combat power. At the level of titled Douluo, low-end combat power didn't mean much. If it was a titled Douluo with a strong group attack, they could even kill low-end combat power in an instant. Moreover, this was the power that Wang Feng saw on the surface after joining the Martial Spirit Palace. Who knew if Bibidan and the Martial Spirit Palace were still hiding something? At this moment, Cardinal Thomas continued to shout a few words respectfully. "Sir." Wang Feng nodded slightly and said, "Got it." As he spoke, Wang Feng looked at Hu Laina and the other 2 who were accompanying him. His gaze fell on Yen. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. Back then in the Pontiff's Palace, Bibidan used Yan's death as an excuse to make things difficult for Tang San and Jiuyi. In the end, he didn't die at all. Although Wang Feng also knew that Bibidan was just looking for an excuse to make a move. Moreover, after more than 4.5 years, Hu Laina's improvement was the slowest among the 3 of the Golden Generation because she didn't cultivate much in Massacre City. But now she was already at rank 62. After returning to the Martial Spirit Palace half a year ago, Bibidan found Hu Laina a 6th soul ring. The other 2 were also at rank 65. In more than 4 years, they had increased by 10 ranks. Now they were only 27 or 28. However, the current Golden Generation admired this Lord Popediff very much, second only to Pope Bibidan. This was because the 3 of them had followed Wang Feng on this trip. Wang Feng had already patrolled more than 10 main cities. Some of the bishops of the main church still had some doubts about this white-robed pontiff, but they were all subdued in a matter of minutes. Needless to say, Hu Laina had seen Wang Feng fight 6 titled Douluo consecutively with her own eyes, and even had a chance encounter with him in Massacre City. She admired him very much. Evil Moon and Yen weren't present at that time, but Popediff alone, in addition to his position as the 3rd consecrator of the Elder Hall, and what they had seen along the way, They were also convinced and worshipped the white-robed Popedif very much. Being strong was one thing, being cool was another. Now that he was bringing the three of them on a long-distance sword kinesis flight, this dazzling and powerful feeling was simply an explosive feeling to the three of them. Flying sword cloud. With Wang Feng's current spiritual power, he was already very proficient in controlling the mysterious Ming flying sword. Furthermore, the second water droplet condensed very quickly. Not only could it increase the width and thickness of the flying sword, but it also increased its stability. It was completely capable of bringing a few people along to fly without feeling strained at all. Every time they landed, the three of them were so excited that their bodies went numb. Logically speaking, the excitement of flying a few hundred meters in the air wasn't something that could be felt by just flying. Actually, Wang Feng also knew why Bibidon wanted the three of them to follow him. It was because the three of them were from the golden generation, and were the cream of the crop among the younger generation of the martial spirit palace. Among them, Hulaina was secretly designated by Bibidon as the next successor to the Pope. She was the Holy Maiden. The purpose was naturally to let him, the white-clothed Popedif, get close to the three of them. After passing Elephant Armor City, we're not far from Heaven Do City. At that time, we'll probably meet the Heaven Do Imperial family. I wonder how Qian Rinxue is doing now? Other than that, the Seven Treasure Glaze Tile sect will definitely come into contact with her, but in the name of Popedif is Little Three also in Heaven Do City now? I'm not sure about the plot, and I don't know if it's... As he thought in his heart, he pondered. Wang Fengxin's thoughts were flying, Lord Popedif. His Majesty the Pope said that if there are no special circumstances, your mask cannot be taken off? Is there a reason? Evil Moon asked respectfully. Brother, why are you asking this question? Before Wang Feng could answer, Hulaina snorted softly and said, Wang Wu. Lord Popedif's appearance is not something that you can see. You're not allowed to ask. Evil Moon. End of chapter. Chapter 561. After becoming Popedif, Bibidon was not dissatisfied with Wang Feng's behavior of wearing a mask. On the contrary, they approved of it. It couldn't be helped. The charm of not wearing a mask was too great. Ordinary soul masters couldn't resist it at all. This charm wasn't just in appearance. It was also a kind of temperament and aura that was too attractive. Just as Wang Feng thought before, his current body was even more tanky than Tang Seng's meat. Therefore, Wang Feng still wore his mask now. His clothes were also specially made white and golden silk robe. It was noble and gorgeous. It was not the pure white robes that Wang Feng wore before. It was a little different from the white-clothed Grim Reaper's appearance. I found that cultivating by Lord Popedif's side has at least doubled my soul power cultivation speed, Yen said happily. He was not interested in Wang Feng's mask. This was actually because of the effect of Wang Feng's meteoric tear and dustless glass body. Because Wang Feng was cultivating all the time, and the energy of heaven and earth poured into Wang Feng's body. It caused a special aura to form around Wang Feng. It was also the reason for the pure aura. Previously in the City of Massacre, it was not obvious. Because the energy in the City of Massacre was extremely violent, it was affected by the environment. Moreover, Hulaina almost never stayed by Wang Feng's side for a long time, let alone Hell's Path. It was difficult to even recover one's soul power, let alone cultivate in that place. Now it was different. Hulaina looked at Wang Feng with a slightly tipsy face. Wang Wu's aura was purer and more refreshing than in the City of Massacre. It was as if there was a natural mimicry environment around him. Their cultivation speed was greatly improved. This was the second reason why Bibidon let the three of them follow Wang Feng. It was also the reason why Evil Moon and Yen admired this white-clothed Popedif even more. Red-robed Thomas was also secretly shocked. This kind of influence also had an effect on him. this white-clothed Popetiff really came out of nowhere. He was extremely mysterious but also extremely powerful and mysterious. He had all kinds of incredible abilities. Lord Popetiff, we have arrived at Elephant Armor City. Huyen Zhen is waiting. At this moment, Thomas looked ahead. From midair, he could naturally see the city in the distance. Wang Feng nodded slightly. Bibidon wanted him to patrol the continent's martial spirit palace and visit the 7 great sections. In fact, there was another test. They wanted him to use the name of White Popetiff to subdue the 4 factions and make them submit to the martial spirit palace. To be precise, it was under the name of White Popetiff. As for the 3 upper sects, they were too powerful. They only allowed him to visit and intimidate them. It would be best if he could challenge them and make his name known throughout the continent. It was because the White Popetiff really valued him that he was entrusted with such a heavy responsibility, which allowed him, the White Robe Popetiff, to have real power in the martial spirit palace instead of just a title. In fact, from this point of view, Wang Feng felt that Bibidon was indeed a person of great talent and bold vision. Giving a name, giving authority, giving a person, it could be said that he did not doubt the person he used. Of course, there was also the intention of testing him. Elephant Armor City was the city where the Elephant Armor sect was located. It wasn't far from Heavendo City, and the Elephant Armor Academy of the 5 great elemental academies was located in this city. Wang Feng had not been to the other 3 sections. This was his second time encountering the Elephant Armor sect. He saw Huyen Zhen from afar. The flying sword descended rapidly like a streak of light and landed on the ground. 5 figures descended from the sky at the same time. Huyen Zhen and the other Elephant Armor sect disciples and elders behind him widened their eyes at this unique method. Soon after, he saw the white-clothed Pope who had caused an uproar in front of him. The seamless mask concealed his face. However, from Hu Laina and the other 2 behind him, as well as the red-robed bishop, it was clear that this was the real person. "Greetings, White Popetiff," Huyen Zhen cupped his fists and said. His tone was filled with awe, and the disciples and elders behind him followed suit. Bishop Thomas frowned. The 4 upper sects were different from the rest of the martial spirit palace. When the White Popetiff arrived in more than 10 cities, they were still suspicious, but the basic etiquette was still in place. After all, he was Popetiff. However, the 4 lower sects, especially the sect leaders, were not inferior to the elders in terms of status. Even if the sect leaders of the 4 sects were not titled Douluo, they could still fight against titled Douluo with their unique abilities. They could be said to be very powerful. They were only dependent on the martial spirit hall, and were not completely subservient to it. As the sect leader, Huyen Zhen's status was slightly higher than the Platinum Bishop. Therefore, Huyen Zhen did not pay his respects to the White Popetiff with the highest etiquette. Thomas could not help but look at Lord Popetiff. This was the first time that the White Popetiff had met someone from the 4 sections. It was different from the Martial Spirit Hall, who was patrolling the various cities. It wouldn't be easy to convince someone like Huyen Zhen. Not to mention the fact that he had a sect behind him. No matter how weak the 7 sects were, they were not comparable to ordinary powers. Right now, Huyen Zhen was already at rank 89. He was getting closer and closer to becoming a titled Douluo. His son, Huyen Li, had a mutated martial soul. He was also very strong, and would surpass Huyen Zhen in the future. He was also at rank 56. Hulaina frowned when she heard this. She was very dissatisfied with Huyen Zhen's tone. However, she would not speak. Evil Moon and Yen did the same. Lord Popetiff must be tired from his inspection. Why don't you rest in the hotel in the city? Huyen Zhen continued. I've already arranged for someone to make the necessary arrangements. After resting, Lord Popetiff can continue his journey. Although he was a little surprised by Huyen Zhen's special way of landing, he was still a person who had dominated the continent. He had seen all kinds of things. He would not be shocked by this. The meaning of his words was very obvious. The elephant armor sect will treat you well. You should leave obediently and patrol your martial spirit hall. Do not provoke, do not reject, and do not distance yourself. As for the rest of the elephant armor sect, you don't have to care too much. Considering the martial spirit palace's reputation, it was a good way to deal with the situation. Huyen Zhen looked like a tall and sturdy man, but he wasn't stupid. After all, the elephant armor sect was dependent on the martial spirit hall. However, being dependent and being submissive were two different things. Being submissive meant accepting the rule and having high authority. Being dependent was a subordinate relationship. They were autonomous. The four great sects were like the ancient vassals that Wang Feng knew about in his previous life. The martial spirit hall was in the middle. Bibidan's second test for him was to remove the vassals and make the four great sects submit to the martial spirit hall. They would submit to the white popedif. However, Wang Feng waved his hand and said calmly, "Don't waste time. I'm sure you know why I'm here. Although I'm the white popedif, I don't like to beat around the bush. I'm here to make the elephant armor sect submit to me. Just say it. P.S. There will be more in a few hours." End of chapter. Chapter 562. Huyen Zhen and the rest were stunned when they heard that. Who would have thought that this white-clothed pope would be so direct? It was as if he was going to use force right from the start. He did not even bother to exchange pleasantries. He went straight to the point. All of a sudden, Huyen Zhen was dumbfounded. If it was a big shot from another faction who dared to say such words to him, he would have given that person a tight slap on the face. However, it was Pope Diff, and it was an extremely special pope in the white cloak. His opponent's aloof and arrogant personality was completely out of the ordinary. At this moment, Huyen Zhen's mind was in chaos. There was no other way. Wang Feng's current persona as the Pope of the White Robes was like this. He had to maintain his own persona. If he messed around with the other party for a while, it would not suit his identity as Nicholas Wang Wu. Wang Feng had been selling his image ever since he was in the Pope's palace. He had no choice. He had to be a spy. It would be embarrassing for an ordinary person to say something like that. Of course, it would be different if someone with power said it. It was like an emperor saying that he wanted to conquer the world and an ordinary person saying that he wanted to conquer the world. The feeling was different. At that moment, sure enough, Huyen Zhen was stunned. Thomas, Hulaina, and the other two were looking at Popediff with sparkling eyes. Huyen Zhen stared at Popediff. He felt that Popediff's aura was huge. It was as if an invisible dragon was going to devour everyone. Huyen Zhen was shocked when he saw that. Popediff was appointed by the Pope himself. He was not an ordinary person. After a while, Huyen Zhen snorted and said, "Lord Popediff, Elephant Armor faction has been passed down for generations. We are not a small faction. If you want us to submit—" Before he could finish, Wang Feng waved his hand and interrupted him. "Cut the crap. Tell me your conditions." Huyen Zhen's face turned red. He felt that his aura was completely suppressed by Wang Feng. He said in a low voice, "2 conditions. First, you can break my defense in 2 moves. You can make Elephant Armor faction submit to you. Second, there are some problems with my son Huyen Li's martial soul. I have consulted many masters who study martial souls, but none of them can solve the problem. If you can solve it, I will submit to you." Huyen Zhen's 2 conditions were actually very important. Firstly, it was related to the dignity of his sect. Secondly, it was related to the legacy of his sect. The Elephant Armor clan was the clan with the best defense among the 7 major clans. They were famous for their defensive abilities. A rank 80 Elephant Armor sect soul master could easily resist a titled Douluo's attack. One could only imagine how powerful he was. Right now, Huyen Zhen was at rank 89. Even a normal titled Douluo wouldn't be able to break through his defenses. not to mention 2 moves. Even the titled Douluo of the Martial Spirit Hall didn't have absolute confidence in breaking Huyenjun's defense. Only the sword Douluo, who was famed for her offensive prowess, was confident that she could break through his attack in 2 moves. For example, the Snake Spear Douluo and the Ghost Douluo couldn't even break through their defenses after 2 or 10 moves. No problem. A few seconds after Huyenjun finished speaking, Wang Feng directly replied, "Hurry up, I'm in a hurry." Huyenjun was stunned. Even if this white-clothed popetiff had the strength of a titled Douluo, was he really that confident? Bibidon hadn't spread the news that Wang Feng had defeated 6 titled Douluo in a row in the pontiff's palace. They still didn't know about this. Huyenjun walked towards an empty space in the distance. Without any hesitation, he directly released his diamond mammoth. Wang Feng had already seen the diamond mammoth during the qualifiers. However, Huyenjun was the sect leader, so he naturally wasn't ordinary. His diamond mammoth martial soul had almost materialized. It was 6 to 7 meters tall and looked like an ancient mammoth. Its entire body was glowing with a dazzling diamond light. It gave off an indestructible feeling, like an iron wall of a majestic city. Huyenjun roared and immediately unleashed his martial soul true body. 8 soul rings lit up. As a defensive-type martial soul, 7 of his 8 soul skills were related to increasing his defense. After adding on all of them, his black soul ring made his diamond mammoth look as if it had been splashed with black gold paint. It looked extremely hard. After activating his martial soul true body, Huyenjun's defensive prowess was only slightly inferior to the Bone Douluo, who was renowned for his defensive prowess. However, the Bone Douluo was a rank 95 Transcendent Douluo. Although the Bone Douluo was a defensive-type martial soul master, he also possessed decent offensive strength. His soul skills weren't purely defensive. However, Huyenjun relied purely on his strength and defense. Roar! Huyenjun roared furiously. His diamond mammoth stomped on the ground and the ground trembled. He's indeed very strong. Wang Feng nodded slightly. Huyenjun's defensive strength was indeed very strong. Without using the Pangu axe, Wang Feng believed that only the God-slaying spear could break through his defenses. However, as the white-clothed popetiff, he couldn't use the God-slaying spear. It wasn't impossible for him to break through his defenses. In fact, it was quite simple. This was because Wang Feng had the divine light of heaven and earth. If his 5th soul skill wasn't the divine light of heaven and earth, Wang Feng wouldn't have been able to do anything to Huyenjun. 2 moves couldn't possibly break through his defenses. Seeing that his opponent was ready, Wang Feng calmly opened his hand. The cauldron of heaven and earth suddenly condensed. It shone with a blood-red light. The light of the 100,000-year soul ring was naturally very bright. Everyone was stunned when they saw it. A 7-colored light silently rose from the cauldron. With a whoosh, it landed on the diamond mammoth. Huyenjun didn't even have time to react. He groaned and his face turned pale. He activated his martial soul true body and transformed into the diamond mammoth. He could clearly sense that his strength was rapidly depleting. It was an extremely uncomfortable feeling. Following this, the diamond mammoth's body started to shrink rapidly. The various enhancements started to weaken. He was astonished. What ability was this? It was important to know that his 8th soul skill was called the Black Steel Diamond Light. It allowed him to be immune to all defense-weakening soul skills. It was a godly skill. As someone with extremely strong defensive strength, he had to be wary of defense-weakening soul skills while ensuring that his defenses were strengthened. Otherwise, his defensive stacks would be so high that his opponent would be able to nullify them with a single defense-weakening spell. Wouldn't that render his soul skills useless? Of course, Huyenjun had taken this into consideration. However, the divine light of heaven and earth didn't just weaken his defenses. He couldn't be immune to it. It's lowering the quality of my martial soul? After a short while, the diamond mammoth that was 6 to 7 meters tall became less than 2 meters tall. It was about the size of a small elephant. Huyen couldn't adapt to the rapid loss of his strength. All of his soul skills seemed to have entered a state of ineffectiveness. End of chapter. Chapter 563. Following that, a figure flashed past. Boom. Huyen complexion suddenly changed. The small elephant-sized diamond mammoth that was attached to him was sent flying away. Huyen martial soul true body was knocked to the ground. He was smashed against the wall, and he was panting heavily. The huge force caused a human-shaped dent to appear on his body. One punch. His defense was broken. Wang Feng waved his hand. The universal divine light was indeed strong. When it landed on Huyen body, Wang Feng activated the power of his blood patterns and defeated Huyen with one punch. It was also proven that the universal divine light had the same effect on beast souls. It wouldn't change based on the type of martial soul. Huyen couldn't dodge such a huge diamond mammoth even if he wanted to. This was the simplest and easiest way to break through Huyen defense. Wang Feng was certain that no soul master on the continent could defeat Huyen as easily as he did. Everyone present, except for Hu Liena, was stunned. Was it that simple? This was a rank 89 diamond mammoth martial soul. The people from the elephant armor sect opened their mouths and looked at the white-clothed Popetiff in disbelief. Isn't he too strong? Yan's mouth trembled. He's about the same as the bishops, archbishops, and red-robed bishops, except that he used an extra soul skill. That's 100,000-year soul skill. Evil Moon broke out in cold sweat. When they were patrolling the cities, some bishops wanted to spar with the white-clothed Popetiff. However, most of them were defeated in 1 or 2 moves. He didn't even let go of his soul skills. They thought that the rank 89 Huyen would be different, but it seemed like there wasn't much of a difference. However, the two of them, as well as red-robed Bishop Thomas, understood why the white-clothed Popetiff was called a Popetiff. Damn it, with 100,000-year soul ring, who can afford to offend him? Let's not even talk about this terrifying and strange soul skill. Very soon, Huyen climbed out of the city wall and returned to his original position. He looked at Wang Feng with a pale face. I'm convinced. Huyen was speechless. 100,000-year soul ring was too terrifying. More importantly, his returned soul skill was extremely powerful. Li'er, come up. Huyen called Huyen over and continued, My son's martial spirit has some problems. I've visited many martial spirit masters, but none of them, before he could finish his sentence, the white-robed Popetiff waved his hand and interrupted him. Needless to say, I already know. Your son has a mutated martial soul. He has a unique flying ability among the diamond mammoths, which completely makes up for the shortcomings of the elephant armor sect. However, your son's martial soul's ability to fly can only be revealed after being attacked. The further we go, the more useless it becomes. Is this what you want to ask? Wang Feng had already seen Huyenli's mutated martial spirit during the preliminaries. His diamond mammoth had a pair of wings, but this pair of wings could only fly after being attacked. When Tang San fought against the elephant armor sect, he was at a disadvantage because of this. However, this was actually a shortcoming. Wang Feng could make use of the information asymmetry to ambush his opponent. However, if his opponent knew about it, this would be a huge disadvantage. Especially towards the end of his cultivation, his wings would become harder and harder, and it would be extremely difficult for him to fly. Huyen was stunned. He did not expect Wang Feng to know so clearly. He could not help but think highly of Wang Feng. It's very simple to solve this problem. Wang Feng continued, In the extreme north, there is a similar soul beast called the icequill bird. Its wings are covered with a layer of steel-like icicles. Normally, it can't fly at all. It can only fly when the layer of icicles is broken. However, the 10,000-year ice-quill bird can control the icicles on its wings freely. It can be used for defense, or it can be retracted to fly. Your son's wings are also covered with a similar layer of diamond skin. He can only fly after breaking the layer of diamond skin. However, you can't control it freely. After hearing this, Huyen seemed to understand something. So, you can go to the extreme north and find an icequill bird for your son to use as his 6th soul ring. This type of bird is not rare in the outer forest. With the soul ring of a 10,000-year icequill bird, your son will be able to control his wings freely. You don't have to doubt that I come from the extreme north. Also, some 10,000-year icequill birds have a special inner core in their bodies. This core is the source of their energy. If he can consume this inner core, his martial soul may evolve and become more complete. However, this requires a certain amount of luck. Wang Feng had been in the extreme north for 2 years, so he was very familiar with the soul beasts there. Very few people knew about these types of soul beasts, so they would not associate them with Huyen Li's situation. Huyen was silent for a moment. Finally, a smile appeared on his face. I believe you. However, I will only truly submit to you after I solve this problem for my son. No problem. Wang Fengxin's thoughts moved, and the sharp blade behind him quickly transformed into an extra-large flying sword. Let's go. Don't waste any more time. Let's go to Heaven Do City. Thomas, Hu Liena, and Hui Yuhao came to their senses. They hurriedly stood on the flying sword and transformed into a streak of light as they flew into the sky. Father, is what he said true? Huyen Li asked in a daze. Whether it's true or not, we'll know when we get there. Huyen said indifferently. Let's go. Let's go to the extreme north. This white popetiff is not simple. Although the extreme north is extremely dangerous, I'm not afraid of the forest outside. If he could solve Huyen Li's problem, then the next sect master of the Elephant Armor sect would be extremely powerful. He would be able to lead the Elephant Armor sect to new heights. Huyen eyes flashed as he looked at the black streak of light in the distance. Huyen Li nodded. Father, this Lord Popetiff is indeed very powerful. This is the first time I've seen him break through your defense so easily. It feels like you're made of paper. Huyen was speechless. The next day, Heaven Do City, Martial Spirit Temple. Bishop Salas straightened his clothes. As a platinum bishop, he had people in the Pontiff Palace. He knew a little about this white Popetiff. He knew how terrifying and powerful he was. In addition, news from the main temple in a distant city had already spread over the past 10 days. He naturally had to receive him with the highest status. Popetiff's position was only slightly inferior to the pontiff. However, the Snowy Night Emperor did not come. The person who came was Crown Prince Xueqinghe, who had become the heir to the Heaven Do Empire. There were also several nobles from the imperial family, such as Prince Xuexing, the 3 education commissioners of Heaven Do City, and the commanders of the imperial guards. Even Douluo was there. As one of the few titled Douluo in the Heaven Do Empire, although he was not related to the imperial family, he still had some connections with Prince Xuexing. Back in the Heaven Do Imperial Academy, it was Prince Xuexing who brought Douluo to cause trouble. Chapter 564. The Martial Spirit Temple was second only to the Pope's Palace, and there were only 2 of them on the continent. Naturally, it was extraordinary and magnificent. Behind him, Tang San was also quietly watching from within the crowd. In his aunt's moon pavilion, he met Princess Xueca and Xueqinghe. Of course, Tang San didn't reveal his identity. Over the past half a year, Tang San had secretly made a trip to Shrek Academy to reunite with the Grandmaster while he was learning in the Moon Pavilion. The others didn't reveal their identities, not even Douluo. In fact, this was the first time he had seen the old poison in 4 years. Looking at the formation around him, Tang San was secretly shocked. There are quite a number of experts from the imperial family. The old poison once said that he owed Prince Xue Xing a debt of gratitude, so he must repay it. There are also the commanders of the imperial guards from the imperial family, the 3 education commissioners, and Prince Xueqinghe. This standard is really strong. On the contrary, Bishop Salas's side is not weak either. 3 soul Douluo, 5 soul sages, and several soul masters. They are slightly weaker than the imperial family, but this is just the martial spirit temple. From this, Tang San could see that the martial spirit temple was really very strong. The martial spirit temple didn't have a titled Douluo, and the Heaven Do Empire wouldn't agree. It's a pity that the sword Douluo and bone Douluo from Rongrong's sect didn't come. Tang San thought to himself, if the white-clothed Popediff is really the white-clothed Reaper, the old poison might not be able to suppress him. At this moment, a black light flashed in the distance. Everyone's eyes focused. They're here. The swords fell, and 5 figures fell from the sky. Tang San couldn't help but hold his breath. His pupils shrank as he looked at the figures that fell from the flying swords. It's really him. Although his clothes have changed slightly into the Martial Spirit Temple's special uniform, his aura is definitely the same. Tang San's face darkened. Standing next to Princess Xueka, his heart sank. He didn't expect the white-clothed Reaper to really become the white-clothed Popediff of the Martial Spirit Temple. The other party's strength in Hell Road had left a deep impression on Tang San. Why is he still wearing a mask? Tang Yin, the one in white should be the white Popediff, right? Princess Xueka, who was standing at the side, whispered in surprise, but how did they come down from the flying sword? They look so powerful. Is that his martial spirit? But I don't see any soul rings. Tang San nodded. That's him. It should be a special kind of soul bone. Princess Xueku was only about 15 years old. She was very interested in many novel things. Seeing Wang Feng and the others descend on their flying swords, they were naturally very curious. At this moment, Xueqinghe and Bishop Salas walked up side by side. When Wang Feng came down, he felt like a big shot visiting a province in his previous life. Needless to say, it felt pretty good. This was Heaven Do City, the political and economic center of the Heaven Do Empire. It didn't matter that the Snowy Night Emperor wasn't present. According to his status, only the pontiff would have the right to be welcomed by the Snowy Night Emperor. Now it was Xueqinghe who was also the Qianrenxue. "Greetings, Lord Popediff," Salas said in a loud voice. Then, he crossed his arms and half knelt on the ground. If he was the pontiff, he would be kneeling. Although Popediff also had to kneel, he didn't have to kneel completely on the ground. This was the highest form of etiquette in the Martial Spirit Hall. When Wang Feng saw Bishop Salas, he was amused. The last time he saw this bishop, he had to use the elder token that the Qianrenxue had given him to fool him. He didn't expect that, in just a few years, he would be kneeling in front of him. Furthermore, he was kneeling so smoothly. It seemed like this bastard had someone backing him in the Martial Spirit Hall. That person had given him a heads-up. Wang Feng waved his hand slightly. Then, he looked at Xueqinghe. It had been more than 4 years. This was the first time Wang Feng saw the Qianrenxue. Since he was dressed as a man, he probably had some special means to disguise himself. There was a huge difference between him and the Qianrenxue, who was dressed as a woman. Moreover, because he was the crown prince, he had a faint smile on his face. His eyes carried a hint of vigilance and melancholy. He had a clean temperament and gave people the feeling that he was an elegant young master. "Greetings, white-robed Popediff." Xueqinghe led the royal family members behind him and bowed respectfully. However, he didn't kneel. Even if he bowed, it was about 45 degrees. Seeing this, Bishop Salas frowned and said, "Your Highness, Lord Popediff is only second to the pontiff in the Martial Spirit Hall. According to etiquette, you should also kneel." What do you mean by this? Xueqinghe was representing the Heaven Dou Empire's royal family. He said, "That's the etiquette of the martial spirit hall. It's not the Heaven Dou Empire's etiquette." With that, Xueqinghe stood up and looked at the white-robed Popetiff in front of him. She had only heard of the name Popetiff a month ago. She was also shocked. She didn't know what was going on with her mother. Why would she appoint a new Popetiff? Back then, Popetiff was abolished by her because he had too much power in the martial spirit hall. Now, he was appointed by her again, unless this person was her confidant. Thinking of this, Qian Rinxue snorted coldly. Even the Elder Hall agreed to let this person become the third consecrator. This person's strength was not simple. I wonder where she found him. Qian Rinxue didn't have a strong feeling about the martial spirit hall. Because she hated her mother, she didn't have much feelings for the martial spirit hall. Moreover, she had been sent to the Heaven Dou Empire as a spy since she was young. This wasn't what she wanted, nor was it what she liked. It was just that she couldn't go against it. That's right, this isn't the Heaven Dou Empire's etiquette. At this moment, Prince Xuexing also spoke up. Bishop Salas, the Heaven Dou Empire's royal family, doesn't need to follow the martial spirit hall's etiquette. Clearly, they were at loggerheads the moment they arrived. As members of the Heaven Dou Empire's royal family, it was unrealistic to expect them to submit to a newly appointed white-clothed Popetiff. You're right. At this moment, the white-clothed Popetiff spoke up. The Heaven Dou Empire doesn't need to follow the martial spirit hall's etiquette. Hearing this, Bishop Salas was stunned. He thought to himself, what's wrong with Lord Popetiff? Why is he speaking up for the Heaven Dou Empire? This isn't what I said, but then, the white-clothed Popetiff continued. However, we need to follow the etiquette of the strong. I am the strong. After he finished speaking, an aura suddenly burst out from Wang Feng's body. Under the original Sin domain, almost everyone's expression changed. The enormous pressure was like a tidal wave that covered the sky. All the soul masters on the Heaven Dou imperial families' side subconsciously circulated their soul power to resist. Other than a good domain, there was also an aura. A terrifying aura. Bishop Salas thought to himself, F***CK, it's just like what I said. This white-clothed Popetiff is different from those from the martial spirit hall. He's simply unreasonable and uses force directly. How admirable! Bishop Salas felt that this Popetiff was simply a turbid current in the martial spirit hall. He had an overwhelming arrogance and domineering aura. I wonder what this domain feels like? This aura, TSK, it's not simple. P.S. Today's 8 update, please count the votes. Chapter 565. Once the original Sin's domain and aura were released, the imperial family, led by Xueqinghe, could not help but bow their heads. For a moment, these imperial family members were shocked and furious. This white-clothed Popetiff style seemed to be completely different from the people from the martial spirit hall. Apart from titled Douluo, even Soul Douluo would be greatly affected by Huiyuhao's original Sin's domain and aura. The most important thing was the domain. This domain was too intimidating. Even if one used their soul power, it would be difficult to resist the infiltration of their emotions. Everyone's face turned red. It was obvious that their soul power was pushed to the limit. The white-clothed Reaper's talent domain is so strong. Tang San thought and considered whether to use his blue-silver domain to resist. He had felt the white-clothed Reaper's domain at Hell Road, but the white-clothed Reaper was dealing with an enemy and was not attacked by a domain. However, as a talent domain, it was definitely not simple. Now, it suppressed the imperial family of the Heaven Dou Empire to the point that they could not raise their head. It was really powerful, but if he used his blue-silver domain, it would be a little dangerous, especially since the other party was from the martial spirit hall. But after thinking about it, Tang San looked at Hulaina behind the white-clothed reaper and thought that since she was here, there was no need to worry about whether he would be exposed or not. After all, Hulaina knew that he had a talent domain. It's too difficult to resist like this. Thinking of this, Tang San quickly used his blue-silver domain and released a faint blue light to envelop everyone. Under the blue-silver domain, the power of the original Sin's domain was slightly weaker. Seeing this, many imperial family members looked at Tang San. Tang Yin, you have a domain too? Princess Xueku's voice was a little weak. She looked at Tang San with a little surprise and gratitude in her eyes. Yes, Tang San paused and nodded slightly. Since he came here to meet the white-clothed reaper, he would not owe him anything if he could help a little. Xue Qinghe also looked at Tang San and thought, this Tang Yin is not simple. I didn't expect him to have a talent domain too. The rest of the Empire's royal family also looked at the commoner brought by Princess Xueka in shock. They didn't expect him to be able to use his talent domain to fight against the white-robed Popediv. Hulaina, who was behind Wang Feng, also looked at Tang Yin in surprise. She was curious. Why was she here? I've never heard of the Clear Sky sect supporting the Heaven Do Empire's royal family. Has the Clear Sky sect sided with the Heaven Do Empire? Hulaina was extremely shocked. The Heaven Do Empire already had the help of the Seven Treasure Glazed Tile sect, and now the Clear Sky sect? Or could it be that Tang Yin did not represent the Supreme Sky sect? For a moment, Hulaina's thoughts were flying. Naturally, Wang Feng also saw Tang San. He could not help but feel a little strange. Was he the villain now? What a pity, little three. Your blue-silver domain is still much weaker. Wang Fengxin said. Immediately, the aura of the 6 blood marks was fully activated. The strength of his original Sin domain depended on the aura of the blood patterns. Each blood pattern represented a special emotion. There were 7 of them now. However, the 7th one was awakening very slowly because it had absorbed the Killer God domain. There were only 6 of them. Although they weren't perfect and didn't affect titled Douluo much, they were still very strong if they were fully activated. Those below the titled Douluo level would be greatly affected. Earlier, Wang Feng had only activated 3 of them. Furthermore, the strength of the domain was not only related to the 7 blood patterns that Wang Feng cultivated. It was also related to the strength of the Soul Master. Now that the aura of the 6 blood patterns was fully activated, the original Sin domain was directly activated and instantly suppressed the pale blue light. This caused the expressions of the Heaven Do Empire's royal family to change drastically. Because of the blue-silver domain, their backs that were slightly raised instantly bent down. They were even about to kneel down. Many people's eyes turned pale red. Evidently, they had reached their limit. Tang San groaned and his face flushed red. He was shocked that the white-robed death god's domain was indeed abnormal. The main thing was that the other party was too strong. He was much stronger than him. Humph! At this moment, Wang Feng's spiritual power was unleashed. He snorted coldly. His snort was like a heavy hammer that struck everyone's minds. His aura skyrocketed. Aura was actually very mysterious. It was directly related to a soul master's soul power. Most importantly, it was directly related to a soul master's spiritual power. The stronger one's spiritual power, the stronger the aura. Wang Feng's strongest point now was indeed his spiritual power. No one present had stronger spiritual power than him. As his aura skyrocketed again, everyone from the Heaven Do imperial family almost knelt down. Tang San was even more shocked. His opponent's spiritual power was probably that of a true titled Douluo or even stronger than a titled Douluo's spiritual power. He had experienced the pressure of many titled Douluo's auras. Naturally, he could clearly sense how strong his opponent's spiritual power was. But at this moment, a voice suddenly rang out. What a white-robed Popediv! Are you trying to suppress us with your aura? As this voice rang out, a slightly sweet aura was released from Douluo's body. When this aura was released, the Heaven Do imperial family heaved a sigh of relief. Domain. Wang Feng was a little stunned as he looked at Douluo. This old poisonous monster actually has a domain after 4 years? That's not right. The old poisonous monster already has his 9th soul ring. Does this mean that this domain is an innate domain? Was it awakened after birth? It's the heaven-scented cloud radish. Wang Feng seemed to recall something. Back when he was cultivating in the Icefire Yin-Yang well, he had given the old poisonous monster an immortal herb. This immortal herb was very suitable for the old poisonous monster. It seemed like this immortal herb had caused some changes as he cultivated. It actually created a special domain. The heaven-scented cloud radish could solve Douluo's problem of cultivating poison. It could also increase the effects of poison. It could also transform a soul master's body into one that was immune to all poisons. The old poisonous monster was only around rank 94 right now. It was already impressive that he had risen by 1 rank in 4 years. However, Wang Feng did not expect him to create a domain. This meant that his martial soul had also changed. However, this was also within reason. The few stalks of immortal herbs back then could be said to have caused changes in Zhu Zhuqing's and Oscar's martial souls. When they reached a higher rank in the future, it was inevitable that they would create a domain. I'm doing this to suppress you. Do you have any other questions? Wang Feng looked at Douluo and said, You're Douluo? Do you want to spar with me? After hearing this, Douluo was stunned. He did not expect Wang Feng to admit it. However, his expression changed when he heard the last sentence. He said proudly, So what if we spar? I also want to see the abilities of the Martial Soul Hall's white-robed Popediff. After the battle at the Pontiff's Palace, Douluo had already stood against the Martial Soul Hall. Naturally, he would not be respectful. All right then. Wang Feng waved his hand and gestured for Hulaina and the others to step back. The old poisonous monster seems to have become much stronger over the past few years. End of chapter. Chapter 566. Douluo quickly dispersed the Heaven Do imperial family. He looked at the white-robed Popediff with a serious expression. Over the past 4 years, his abilities had improved very quickly. Compared to that rotten chrysanthemum, he had improved by leaps and bounds. However, this was all thanks to the heaven-scented cloud radish. Douluo thought of that crazy kid every time he thought of this. He had searched many places over the past 4.5 years, but he hadn't found anything. As everyone dispersed, they knew that these two would definitely meet. Although they didn't know how the battle would turn out, they were all watching closely. The old poison is already at rank 94. The heaven-scented cloud radish that Brother Feng gave him back then has also shown its effects over the years. At least he's no longer the weakest titled Dalu. His martial soul has also awakened a domain. His abilities have increased greatly. Tang San thought to himself, but this white-robed Popediff should also be a titled Dalu. He's not simple, but as long as he doesn't lose, the Heaven Do imperial family will be able to raise their heads. Douluo's abilities had indeed improved greatly over the past 4 years. He wasn't far from becoming a transcendent Douluo now. After all, he had the help of the immortal herb. In the plaza, Douluo shouted softly. There was a murderous look in his eyes. He didn't have a good impression of the Martial Soul Hall at all. The Pope had purposely found an excuse to attack them back then. Now there was no need to hide it anymore. That Golden Age flame had even appeared openly. It was a pity that only the Shrek imperial family was present back then. Not many people knew about it. In addition, Xiao Wu's identity was exposed after that battle. Hence, they could only suffer in silence now. They couldn't reveal what had happened in the Pope's palace back then. Jade Unicorn Snake Emperor True Body. A jade unicorn snake emperor that was as thick as an ancient tree emerged from Douluo's body. The huge and solid martial soul true body didn't exude a fishy and poisonous aura like before. Instead, it had a faint sweet smell. Those who didn't know better would think that it was a pet snake. However, this sweet smell was a sign that the poison was more potent. Tang San, who had the greatest understanding of poison, was extremely clear. The aura of a rank 94 titled Douluo instantly boosted the morale of the Heaven Do imperial family. Mr. Douluo is getting stronger and stronger. A smile appeared on Prince Xuexing's face. Douluo had helped the imperial family of the Heaven Do Empire partly because of his relationship with Prince Xuexing, but it was mostly because Douluo and the Martial Spirit Hall were in complete opposition. Now that he saw Douluo getting stronger, he was naturally more confident. If they could frustrate the new Popetiff's prestige here, it would be a huge blow to the Martial Spirit Palace. However, Wang Feng was in a daze. He was thinking, how could he defeat the old poison? Was he going to use the divine light of heaven and earth to take him away? Or should I just seal it and take it away? Or could he just use his sword to attack? Sigh, there are too many ways. I really don't know which one to use to defeat the old poison. Wang Feng looked at the old poison and found it difficult to make a decision. Logically speaking, although the old poison was strong now, he had long been immune to poison. The old poison couldn't do anything to him. Once the divine light of universe appeared, his jade-scaled serpent emperor would probably turn into a cauliflower snake. The effect of the spiritual seal was also very strong. As long as the old poison could be controlled for a few seconds, Wang Feng would immediately unleash the power of his 6 blood patterns and beat him up. The old poison wouldn't be able to resist even if he used his sword to attack. This was because his defensive abilities weren't very strong. Why isn't Lord Popetiff making a move? According to the person above me, he's comparable to a transcendent Dalu, the 3rd consecrator of the Elders' Hall. He's no joke. Bishop Salas was very uneasy. At this moment, Douluo roared furiously. His 8th soul ring lit up. A thin beam of light was released from the jade-scaled serpent emperor's eyes. Soul skill, time freeze. This was an extremely strong control-type soul skill. It could freeze an enemy's body. Of course, it wasn't really time freeze. It was more like slowing down. He used the poison released by the jade-scaled serpent emperor to affect the enemy. This would greatly reduce the enemy's speed, as if they were moving in slow motion. If one's soul power was too low and one's movements too slow, it would be equivalent to time freeze. Instantly, Wang Feng's surroundings seemed to have been frozen. There wasn't even a breeze. Douluo was evidently very serious. He seemed to be a little worried. His skull suddenly shone with intense light, and his skull appeared. A beam of light hit Wang Feng's body. He couldn't avoid it. Almost instantly, Wang Feng's entire body was covered by a thin layer of stone. This was Douluo's skull's soul skill, Medusa's Gaze. It could petrify an enemy. Douluo used his strongest soul skill right from the start. He didn't hold back at all. It was evident how much prejudice he had against the Martial Soul Hall. Fortunately, he didn't use his 9th soul skill. This was because his 9th soul skill had a huge area of effect. Once it was released, it could poison the entire sacred hall and everyone present. It could even affect Heaven Do City. Even so, it was enough to control the other party. Following this, Douluo controlled the jade-scaled serpent emperor's martial soul true body. He swung his tail and attacked Popetiff. Everyone held their breaths when they saw this. Even a titled Dalu wouldn't be able to break free from Douluo's control. If this tail were to land, this white-clothed Pope would clearly lose face. However, would it be so simple? Just as Douluo's tail swung towards Wang Feng, a black ray of light suddenly slashed down from the sky at an extremely fast speed. It was the mysterious underworld flying sword. When Wang Feng brought the four of them down, the mysterious underworld flying sword remained in midair. The huge flying sword slashed down with a force that could split a mountain. It collided with the jade-scaled serpent emperor's tail, and a shockwave spread in all directions. Douluo retreated quickly. He looked at Popediff, who had been petrified. He was petrified and solidified, but his sword didn't seem to be affected at all. Of course, it wasn't affected. The mysterious underworld flying sword was controlled by spiritual power. It didn't have much effect on restricting Wang Feng's physical body. Swish, swish, swish. At this moment, the mysterious underworld flying sword didn't seem to stop at all. It attacked Douluo directly. A beam of black light revolved in front of the jade-scaled serpent emperor. Every attack caused great damage to its martial soul true body. The jade-scaled serpent emperor's forte wasn't defense. It couldn't resist the power of the mysterious underworld flying sword. Furthermore, Wang Feng used his spiritual power to control the mysterious underworld flying sword and split it into two. He was about to condense two spiritual water droplets. The flying sword formed into two, but its power didn't decrease at all. It was even stronger. The two swords complemented each other and directly suppressed Douluo. Wang Feng was still petrified. It looked extremely weird. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.